All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to the Black Brain Trust. Today is Wednesday, August 8th, 888 or 8818. Today is our Geopolitics show. One of your co-hosts, Londell, here with my other co-host, Mike. Today we have a great show for you today. A lot of things going on, action-packed docket today. So, with that said, let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. All right. Our first article comes from AlJazeera.com, titled Maduro to release proof of Colombian role in drone attack. Venezuelan president says he has sufficient evidence that Colombia is behind the foil assassination attempt. All right, article. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro promised to release proof of Colombian involvement in what he calls an assassination attempt against him. In a video posted on Twitter, Maduro said police and the military had captured all the perpetrators and were in the process of tracking down the attack's masterminds. There is sufficient evidence on the participation of the outgoing Colombian government of President Manuel Santos, he said late Monday, adding he would release proof in the next few hours. Juan Manuel Santos, whose term in office ends on Tuesday, refuted the accusations, saying he was at a family event on Saturday when a drone loaded with explosives detonated near a military event where Maduro was giving a speech. God, for God's sake, to Venezuela's president, I say this. On Saturday, I was doing more important things. I was at my granddaughter's baptism, said Santos. Maduro was unharmed in Saturday's incident, which he blamed on a right wing plot involving Colombia and financiers in the U.S. state of Florida, where many Venezuelans live. Even soldiers were wounded in the blast. So far, no evidence has been provided to support the claims. 6 people were arrested on Sunday in connection with the blast, according to Venezuela's interior minister. On Monday, Maduro failed to appear at a support rally in Caracas, where he had been expected to speak in what would have been his first public appearance since the purported attack. No explanations was offered for his absence. Fraught relations. Tensions have been high between Colombia and Venezuela in recent years. Close to 1 million Venezuelans have crossed the porous border into the neighboring country since the social, economic, and political crisis began in 2016, according to Colombian government figures. While many have returned to Venezuela, about 600,000 have remained, causing Santos to ask for international assistance. Both Santos and Ivan Duque, Colombia's president-elect, who is to be sworn in on Tuesday, have been vocal critics of Maduro. During his presidential campaign, Duque compared Maduro's management of his country to a man who beats his wife and children, saying Colombia has a moral responsibility to speak out against his government. And that's an article. Outside of the past tensions between these two countries that the article says started in 2016, I remember we spoke about a few weeks ago how Colombia was joining NATO and how we think that NATO will try to attack Colombia in some way through proxy, which is Colombia. Do you think this has anything to do with that?
Not necessarily. So Colombia has always been a puppet of the United States, uh, uh, SOCOM, which is U.S. Southern Command, um, and basically they've been a wedge inside South America for maybe about since the beginning of um, the Cold War. So Venezuela, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Chile, um, Argentina. Those are all former communist style regimes that have been in power for quite some time, and their politics do not mesh well with the United States. So they're at odds. Now, number two, Venezuela's oil is the biggest oil reserve in at least in the West, if not the world. So there's a urgency to try to take the oil from Venezuela, and I think Trump even mentioned that in one of his interviews that we should just go into Venezuela and just take their oil.
Hmm.
So there's an urgency to try to knock down the socialist governments in Latin America because they don't align well with U.S. Foreign policy. Now, did Colombia actually make this assassination attempt? It's 50-50. They deny it, but there's evidence to support that they've always instigated Venezuelan politics. Um, so we know that they're at odds with Venezuela, but at the same time, um, if if Colombia was to join NATO, then Article 5 inside NATO basically says if one NATO partner is attacked, then all NATO partners must come to the defense of that one NATO partner.
Ooh. So let's say, okay, okay. The Colombia and Venezuela are have differences right now. If that escalates to a point where Colombia says, uh, without even proof or hard proof, that Venezuela tried to attack Colombia in such way, its president or any of its political leaders, would that then give NATO the the opportunity to go in and take over Venezuela?
No, they wouldn't take over because for one, China will get involved. Two, Brazil will get involved because Brazil doesn't want NATO on its borders either. And three, Russia would be involved almost immediately. And then you
Oh,
have World War III, and I don't think anybody wants to have World War III inside Latin America over Venezuela over Colombia. Colombia is not worth it in that regard.
now why isn't Colombia worth it?
Um,
No resources.
no, they're not a premier country in the
Hmm.
same context as the G8, right, or the G7. So if you look at the G7 and who makes up the G7, Colombia is not a part of that. So why bother going to the defense of Colombia and losing men over that? Like this doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Now would Venezuela be worth it?
Venezuela would be worth defending because Venezuela is a strategic piece inside global economics. If the oil is mismanaged in any sort of way, then what happens to the oil market, to the OPEC members of the market? Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and many of Russia included, um, even Nigeria. All of that can cause a destabilization in the market, and that's why there's an urgency to make sure that these countries are stabilized.
Okay. Okay. I understand. So Venezuela is a pertinent piece, like you said, inside of the geopolitical economic picture.
Right, and their crisis right now is due to the fact there's an inflation in currency. But what the media doesn't say is um, how the United States has sanctions on Venezuela. They don't mention that. They just say, "Oh, well, it's because of socialism." It's not exactly because China is a socialist state too, but yet they don't seem to have the same problems.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, we definitely gonna keep an eye on this. I know, like I said a few weeks ago, it raised our eyebrows when NATO allowed Colombia in. That was fishy. That raised our eyebrows.
Yeah, why let Colombia in but not let Mexico in?
Yes, yes. All right. Let's get to our next article. This is a short one, but it came with a video also. This is from therealnews.com. Title: Why did Saudi state media threatening 9/11 on Canada? Written August 7th, 2018. Ottawa's criticism of a crackdown on dissidents has prompted Saudi Arabia to freeze its Canadian ties, and a kingdom linked Twitter account to even threaten a 9/11 style attack. Saudi analyst Al, Al Ali Al Ahmed says Riyadh's behavior is a reminder that its claim of reform are a shame. So that's the article right there. Have you heard anything about this? I I forgot who requested to put this on the docket.
Oh,
I've heard it.
I was actually muted. I was talking, but I was muted. But
Okay.
to answer your question, I haven't really heard too much anything verbally, but there has been some Twitter beefs going back and forth between the Canadian foreign ministry and Saudi Arabia's internal ministry, and they basically suspended and kicked out, the Canadian ambassador to Saudi Arabia because they were interfering, talking about human rights violation of women or women's rights, and Saudi Arabia put that person on the plane and sent them right back to Canada. And Canada says, well, we're not going to back down. But the United States and Donald Trump are basically saying we ain't got nothing to do with this. So what could possibly happen is you may see a skirmish go back and forth between Canada and Saudi and Mecca, or Riyadh, I should say. And what could happen here is you could see more terrorist attacks start to prop up against the Canadian foreign government or the Canadian government itself.
Mm. So he said something about women's rights, but my thing is this: what makes you think they're going to listen to you, knowing their history of their religion and how they do things? Well, I don't understand why would he even do that.
You mean it was actually a woman?
Okay,
It
that
was
makes
actually a
it
woman.
worse.
Yeah.
That makes it that do not make it any better.
Or,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Of course they would kick her out because to them they're saying, okay, you're starting a uproar or dust up when you know that what role women play in our country. How dare you even open your lips to speak those words? Of course they're gonna get her out of there. They don't. It goes against everything that they live by.
Well,
So what?
well,
Yeah.
instigating something like that as fragile as because Saudi Arabia is an extremely fragile country. It doesn't take much to turn their country upside down from a political standpoint because it's so unstable. Um, and you have a Canadian government decide to go in there and do that. They see that as sponsoring a left wing movement inside the country, which is something that they don't need because um, you sponsor something like that, and the Saudi government starts to come down to its knees within a few weeks or even a week itself. Um, Saudi Arabia is going to react to that, whether people agree with them or not. They're going to react to that from a geopolitical standpoint, and a whole lot can come out of that. I mean, we think about Canada. We think about Canada as being this, benevolent country that's, where people just have, bacon and, and mounties and, on
Maple
horses.
syrup. Yeah.
Yeah, in reality, Canada has always played a very malicious role inside Middle Eastern politics. They were actually bombing Syria early in the campaign, including Australia as well. So the Canadians have been involved in a lot of instigation as well, and then they're no innocent actor in all of this.
Okay. Yeah. Like a woman saying this, and you in this country, yeah. I I'm not gonna say what I think they should have done, but or agree or not. But yeah, that's the story. All right. Let's get to our next article. Our next article is from SputnikNews.com. Title: Middle East intelligence official Mossad behind Syrian rocket chief car bomb. Written August 8th. Article. It's been reported a senior Middle East intelligence agency official has blamed Israel's controversial intelligence agency, Mossad, for the assassination of a top Syrian rocket scientist. Okay, now you understand. For those listening to this, now you understand the title. Mossad behind Syrian rocket chief car bomb. All right, continuing on. Aziz Asbar and his driver were killed when his car exploded in the northern city of Mas- Masyaf late August 4th. The unnamed official told the New York Times Israel was behind the attack and said his own intelligence agency, again undisclosed, had been informed of the operation in advance. Long term objective. Mossad apparently targeted Asbar as it was suspected he headed a classified weapons development program, Sector 4, at the Syrian Scientific Studies and Research Center. The center in Masyaf has repeatedly been the target of Israeli airstrikes. One attack in April killed a number of staff stationed there. The official alleged Israel had been tracking Asbar for years, wanting to assassinate him over his prominent role in Syria's weapons program prior to the outbreak of the Syrian crisis in 2011. It's allegedly the fourth time in 3 years Mossad has assassinated a weapons engineer in a foreign country. For instance, a Hamas rocket scientist was shot dead in Malaysia in April, and a drone engineer was killed in Tunisia in December 2016. Mossad has consistently denied responsibility for such killings, and the slaying of Asbar is no exception. On the morning of August 7th, Gilead, Gilad Erdan, head of Israel's Public Security and Strategic Affairs Ministry, declined to discuss Israel's involvement in the Syrian scientist's killing, but welcomed the news. We obviously do not comment on these kinds of reports, but we can talk about the man himself, who was responsible for putting high quality weapons in the hands of some bad people. And so we can say that the fact that he is no longer with us is a good thing, he told Israel Radio. Shoot first. Whether Mossad is responsible for Asbar's executions or not, it is unquestionable the Israeli state is responsible for killing more people than the agents of any other state since World War II. As Israel journalist Ronen Bergman has documented, the number of deaths attributed to Tel Aviv never to be I read that again. As Israeli journalist Ronen Bergman has documented, the number of deaths attributed to Tel Aviv will never be known for certain, but undoubtedly run to thousands. After all, Israeli operatives have carried out around 800 assassinations in the past decade alone. He urges the Talmudic direction: if someone comes to kill you, rise up and kill them first, has been the spying agency's guiding principle since the State of Israel established in 1948. Often, these slayings are luridly elaborate, using resources evoking the improbable lethal gadgetry of James Bond novels and films. For instance, in January 1978, after 6 years, subject Mossad kill order, Wadi Haddad, founder of the far left populist front for the liberation of Palestine, was killed via poisoned toothpaste. A Mossad agent, known as Sadness, infiltrated Haddad's inner circle and switched his toothpaste for an identical tube laced with a deadly toxin, developed in a secret Israeli laboratory. Every time the man brushed his teeth, a tiny quantity of the toxin worked its way through his gums into his bloodstream, and slowly but surely he started dying. He was eventually flown to hospital in East Berlin, where he died in agony 10 days later, bleeding from every orifice. These state backed hits haven't always been successful, however. In another fantastical operation in 1968, directly inspired by a conspiracy thriller film, The Manchurian Candidate. Mossad hired a Swedish-born psychologist to brainwash a Palestinian prisoner into murdering Yasser Arafat, chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization. The psychologist spent 3 months hypnotizing the subject with the simple message: Arafat bad, he must be removed. The prisoner, known as Faki, okay, was also trained to shoot pictures of the popular Palestinian leader, hidden in a special prepared room. In December that year, Mossad smuggled him across the River Jordan, from where he was supposed to infiltrate Arafat's headquarters. 5 hours later, they received some bad news. Fatki had gone to a police station and accused Israeli agents of trying to brainwash him. Mistaken identity. Similarly, in 1973, as part of Operation Wrath for God, Mossad agents hunted Ali Hassan Salameh, chief of operations for Black September, the group that murdered 11 Israeli athletes in 1972 Munich Olympics. An undercover operator serendipitously spotted the individual working in a cafe in Lillehammer, Norway. On July 21st, as the man and his pregnant wife got off the bus, Mossad assassins opened fire, shooting him 13 times. However, the intelligence agency has fouled up. The individual was not Salameh, but Alma Buhiki, the innocent Moroccan waiter. Norwegian police arrested 6 Israeli agents in the aftermath, and 5 served time in Norway. All were eventually released under a secret deal. But the quintet were hailed as heroes upon their return to Israel. Nonetheless, several other captured agents disclosed vital information to authorities, critically damaging Mossad's secret infrastructure in Europe. Investigators found a key one investigators found a key on one of the suspects, which the individual identified as a key for Mossad's safe house in Paris. It was handed over to French police, who raided the flat and discovered keys to other Mossad safe houses in the city. Information on Mossad safe houses, phone numbers, and agents gathered was shared widely with European security services, leading to the recall of many agents, abandonment of safe houses, and wholesale dumping of crucial operational methods. Mossad would finally get their man January 1979 in a car bomb attack. 8 innocent bystanders were also killed, including a German nun and a British student. Other killing operations, both old and new, have been considerably less artful, but considerably more efficient. For instance, in January 2010, a team of several dozen Mossad agents flew to Dubai using forged passports, wigs, and false mustaches to kill Hamas chief Mahmoud al Mabhouh at the luxurious Al Bustan Hotel. When Al Mabhouh entered his room, agents seized him and used high-tech ultrasound equipment to inject poison into his neck without breaking skin. He died within moments, and most of the agents fled the country within hours. The killing sparked international outcry and diplomatic cries between Israel and several allies, and the agents involved used counterfeit passports from at least 5 countries. Response from implicated nations was in some cases significant. For instance, in March 2010, the UK Foreign Secretary Donald Miliband expelled an Israeli diplomat, and Australia abstained on a United Nations motion to investigate alleged Israeli war crimes committed during the Gaza war, a motion Canberra had previously opposed, as well as expelling a Mossad agent who worked in the Israeli embassy. All right, that was a longish article, Mike, and I understand previously we went over how there was a rocket scientist that was killed. I forgot where, but I think we said by Israel,
I think it was in
um,
Indonesia.
Indonesia. Okay, and um, He said Mossad killed him. So I'm thinking they killed this guy because not because he's a quote unquote bad guy, and that's even questionable, but because if Syria gets their rocket program up, they can seriously counterattack Israel. So they're trying to prevent Syria's rocket program from getting off the ground. That's what I'm thinking.
You would be right in your assessment. But the problem is that's just the chief, right? So that means that there's underlings under him, who serve up to him. You know, you have your jet propulsion people, and you know your other aeronautic analysts and things, technicians and things of that nature. And at this point, you can get rocket technology from anywhere else in the world as well. I mean, it's not like North Korea hasn't shared information with Syria before. So if they need to get any sort of expertise on rocket development, they can go to Russia, they can go to Iran, they can go to Iraq. There's still a lot of STEM graduates coming out of these institutions that are either loyal to Syria, the Syrian government, or can be bought at a small price. I mean, this is just more of a message to the Syrian government that you can be touched out here.
That's this. This goes to how serious they are in in these clandestine these to stunt the growth of these governments because Syria is right next door. I think is it right next door or is Lebanon then Syria? But it is they're still a neighbor of Israel.
Yeah, it's Syria is about 85 miles away from Israel.
Mm. All right, well there you have it, folks. Excuse me. All right, let's get to our next article. It's from RT.com. Title: NATO fighter jet accidentally fires live missile near Russian border. Who written August 7th. Excuse me, article. Spanish fighter jets taking part in a NATO air policing mission over Estonia have been temporarily suspended from completing their duties after one of the pilots erroneously fired an armed missile during a training flight. A group of two Spanish Eurofighter Typhoon 2000 jets and two French Mirage 2000 jets were taking part in a training exercise over southwestern Estonia on Tuesday when one of the Spanish planes accidentally launched an air to air missile, the Spanish Defense Ministry said in a statement, adding that the projectile did not hit any aircraft. All the jets then safely returned to their Sulai air base in Lithuania, the ministry said, adding that it has opened an investigation into the incident. Meanwhile, the Estonian authorities decided to ban the Spanish aircraft from taking part in the air policing missions over its territory for a while. I have ordered a suspension of all military sorties by the Spanish jets until the situation is resolved, the Estonian defense minister, Jüri Luik, said, as cited by the national ERR broadcaster. He added that the NATO air mission will continue, though. ERR reports that the Portuguese Air Force will take Spain's place as part of the mission for the time being. The most important thing is to ensure safety and find out what happened, together with our allies, Luik said, commenting on his decision. The missile fired by the jet should have self-destructed, but apparently failed to do so. The projectile in question is an AM or AMRAAM type air-to-air missile with a firing range of 100 kilometers that carries a warhead fitted with explosives of up to 10 kilograms. It was last located some 40 kilometers north of the Estonian city of Tartu, where it might have landed on the ground, according to Estonian media. The Estonian Air Force launched a search operation on Tuesday evening. The authorities also asked the locals to be wary of and notify the military or the emergency services in case they find the missile or its parts. The Estonian Prime Minister Jüri Ratas called the incident horrible and regrettable. However, he nevertheless praised the NATO mission as a very important and necessary part of ensuring Estonia's security. So, um, a missile accidentally fires near a Russian border. What do you think about this one?
You don't just accidentally fire a missile. You have to have a target, and you have to be able to actually get permission to actually pull the trigger. I mean, you don't
I
just
agree.
fire off something like that unless somebody gave you the green light to do so. Because you usually when you I haven't been in the military, so I'm just saying it's based on my brother's been in the military before. So usually you have a chain of command that allows you to take action. So um, so you actually if you clear it hot to shoot,
Mhm.
and once you're given the green light, then you go ahead. But if they're saying that this was an accident, an accident is something that wasn't supposed to happen. Firing a missile off of a jet near your enemy's border is not an accident. That's more strategic. What they could be doing from a military standpoint is testing Russian defenses to see if there
Mhm.
was going to be what kind of reaction are you going to get from the missiles coming close to your border.
That's a good one. That's a good assessment. And me, honestly, me also, I don't believe it was accidental because I've heard these type of things happen from time to time, and each one I don't think is accidental. It's strategically planned. Like you said, I agree with what you said. They're trying to see what kind of what the Russian government will do in this situation. So it's a strategic plan to see what's going to happen. I agree with you. All right. Any other points on that one?
I haven't heard anything from the Russians. Actually, Russian defense ministry actually speak out on it. So
Okay. Cool. 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 All right. Our next article comes from Stratford Worldview. Worldviewstratford.com. Title: China, Syria. Officials say the Chinese military is willing to help the Syrian army retake Idlib. Am I saying that right? Idlib?
Idlib, yeah.
Idlib. All right. Written August 3rd. Article. What happened? Both China's ambassador to Syria as well as its military attache in the country have raised the possibility of Chinese military operations in Syria alongside the Syrian government. Chinese ambassador Xi Jinping reportedly stated that the Chinese military is willing to participate in some way alongside the Syrian army that is fighting the terrorists in Idlib and in any other part of Syria. While military attaché Wang Ruichang reportedly said the Chinese military could participate in an operation to retake rebel-held Idlib if Beijing made the political decision for it to do so. It is important to stress that neither statement is a confirmation that China is about to send military forces to participate in combat operations in Syria. However, the comments, if true, would mark the closest confirmation we have had of such a possibility. Why it matters. Active Chinese military involvement in Syria would mark a substantial step forward in overall Chinese involvement in the Middle East and in the global sense as well, except for operations under the United Nations. peacekeeper mandate, China has largely avoided military operations beyond its borders or its immediate region. A military operation in Syria could open the door for further such Chinese involvements around the globe. China has also long been concerned about Uyghur militants in the Turkestan Islamic Party, or TIP, operating in Idlib. Given the extensive combat experience of TIP's Syrian branch and its significant capabilities, Beijing has an interest in seeing Uyghur militants destroyed before some of them return to Central Asia or even China. Primarily for that reason, it makes sense for China to consider a more active involvement in a battle to retake Idlib. However, even if China does participate in the campaign to retake Idlib, when is far, which is far from certain, its involvement would remain fairly low key. China's focus in Idlib would be to see key tip leaders and fighters killed. To that end, the most likely Chinese deployment would primarily involve military advisors, intelligence personnel, and perhaps some special operations forces for specific direct action missions. In terms of the latter, this would likely involve small scale deployments of Chinese People's Army. Excuse me. In terms of the latter, this would likely involve small scale deployments of specialized Chinese People Armed Police Force unit, such as the Snow Leopards Commando Unit, which has considerable counterterrorism experience. Still, even such a low level commitment by China would mark a remarkable departure in the overall Chinese strategy and would signal a new approach by Beijing to its involvement in the Middle East and further afield. What's at stake? If China decides to wade into the Idlib morass, it will have to factor in the large number of involved parties, including Russia, Turkey, and Iran. Idlib technically falls under a de escalation status arrangement agreed to by the listed countries in the Astana peace process. Nevertheless, significant differences remain between Russia, Turkey, and Iran. Ankara, which has provided support for TIP in the past, is striving to maintain the de escalation zone and prevent a loyalist offensive that could result in yet another massive spillover of refugees into Turkey. Moscow is also keen to maintain its de escalation zone agreement with Turkey, but is getting impatient with the continued existence of dangerous factions in Idlib, such as TIP and Tahrir al-Sham, known as HTS, that continue to attack Russian and loyalist targets. Finally, Tehran and Damascus will prefer to see the de-escalation zone agreement scrapped and a full offensive on Idlib launched, but they are wary of proceeding without active Russian support, given the considerable Turkish presence in the province. All of these considerations ensure that China will have to carefully approach any military involvement in Syria, particularly with regard to Idlib. Careful coordination with Russia, the Syrian government, and Turkey will be necessary for Beijing to avoid severe complications in Syria, particularly given its substantially smaller footprint in Syria compared to other countries. All right, and I'm going to read this part, what to watch for next. Further clarifications or statements from Chinese officials with regard to their intentions in Syria. Negotiations among Russia, Iran, Syria, Turkey, and China over the status of Idlib, as well as mobilization of forces that would signal a battle over the province. Signs or reports of Chinese developments of agents or of forces to Syria. All right, so China may help Syria take down these forces. And last week we spoke how ISIS may travel west into the Middle East and the Stan region up to Russia and I brought up the point where even though you told me they're from those regions already, such as Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, not Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, they're from those regions. And I brought up that if they do that, they may recruit more members from those regions. So China, I understand China's view where they want to stop this threat right then and there instead of it growing and coming back west to that region, especially when there's a high Muslim, high Muslim uh, population in eastern China, western Kazakhstan.
Right. So the Uyghurs are actually the Muslims of China, mainland China, and the problem is Turkey actually brought the Uyghurs up there. So Turkey brought the Uyghurs from China up to northwest Syria to occupy that territory and actually become a part of the the faction of carving out a piece of Syria in the destabilization process during the uprising. So they estimate that there's anywhere between 5 to 10,000 of these Muslim fighters from or the Uyghurs from China. So that makes China very concerned about these guys coming back from Syria with training, with fighting experience, as well as weapons into the mainland. Um, Turkey promised these guys, the Uyghurs, um, a state within Syria itself by carving out a piece of it, and that's not something that can happen. Syria couldn't tolerate something like that because it's against the constitution to actually reform the make up new states within the country itself. It's within the state's within the country's constitution. However, China also doesn't care too much for these Uyghurs because they're nonconformist to communist communist ideology that goes on within the political framework for China. So China doesn't really know what to do with them. They're basically outliers for the most part, and Erdogan thinks he's going to be this savior for all these lost Muslims who don't have any sort of appreciation for the for the places that they actually stay in. So they're bringing all these Muslims. He's bringing all these Muslims across the world to Syria to actually fight the Syrian government. But what's starting to happen is that he's losing them group by group because Russia is involved in the bombing campaign as well as Syrian troops are starting to regain territory and forcing these guys to either leave or die. So these Uyghurs, China doesn't want them coming back. China's going to go in there and try to clean them out. I highly doubt that they're just going to send military advisors. They have a very strong contingent sitting right inside Africa, inside what country is that? Not Eritrea,
Djibouti.
Djibouti. They're in Djibouti, so they have a strong contingent there that can actually go in there and clean out those terrorists and stop them from coming back.
All right, okay, okay. Hey, I'm learning more and more as we go on. Um, all right. Let's get to our next article. God, I stopped the screen share here. My apologies. Okay, our next article comes from, excuse me, our next article comes from EurasiaReview.com. Title: China says it's willing to help Assad retake rest of Syria. Written August 6th by Mina. All right, the Chinese ambassador to Syria. There he goes again. The Chinese ambassador to Syria, Xi Jinping, has shocked Middle East pundits and observers with statements this week indicating the Chinese military may directly assist the Syrian army in an upcoming major offensive on jihadists held Idlib province. I think it's just a mention of what we just wrote. So I'll just read to it, then go to our next article. The Chinese military is willing to participate in some way alongside the Syrian army that is fighting the terrorists in Idlib and in any other part of Syria, the ambassador said in an interview with the pro-government daily newspaper Al Watan, subsequently translated by the Middle East Media Research Institute. Substantial rumors from pro-Damascus sources of a major Syrian Russian-led offensive to take back Idlib, held since 2015 by a Nusra Front uh, dominated coalition since rebranding itself as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS, has been swirling since the now successful Assad campaign to take back the whole of the South was initiated, and these sources indicate the battle could begin as early as September. But crucially, Idlib province is now the ground zero gathering point of nearly all jihadists and ISIS factions remaining in Syria, including foreign fighters. According to some estimates, there are upwards of 40,000 armed jihadists within the main anti Assad factions in Idlib, embedded within a population of about 2 million civilians and internally displaced persons, or IDPs. Thus, the coming battle for Idlib is expected to be among the most bloody and grinding of the entire 7 years of war, similar to Aleppo in 2016. China is chiefly interested in allying, China is chiefly interested in allying with Syrian government forces to root out the significant opponent of Chinese Muslim foreign fighters operating in Idlib. The hardline Islamists, that's pronounced Uyghur, right? Uyghur militants have entered Syria in the thousands over the past years from the western Chinese province of Xinjiang, where the minority ethno-religious group has focused itself under increased persecutions and oversight by the state. In 2017, the Syrian government estimated their numbers at around 5,000. Chinese ambassador to Syria, Xi Jinping, emphasized mutual counterterrorist interest in his comments while making indirect reference to Uyghur jihadists, telling Al Watan, quote, there is positive military cooperation between China and Syria in the domain of counterterrorism. We know that the war on terror and Syria's campaign against the terrorists have served not only the interests of the Syrian people, but also the interests of the Chinese people and of all the peoples of the world. He explained further the Chinese, end quote. He explained further of Chinese interest in the war. Quote, there has been close cooperation between our armies in fighting the terrorists who came into Syria, who came to Syria from all over the world, including terrorists who came from China. This cooperation between the armies and other relevant elements will continue in the future. End quote. So that was just an addition to the last article we read. Now this
I was hoping you would click on that blockchain tech conference ad that popped up there.
I didn't see it. I was so focused on the article, I didn't see it. Let me refresh it, see if it'll pop up. Let's try a look. Nah.
It's at the bottom.
Oh, let me scroll down. Oh, you know what? Let me click on it, and then we'll get to it after the
Mhm.
after show here. Wait a minute. Am I clicking on the same thing over and over again? Yes, I am. All right. Well, apologize about that, people. All right. Our next article comes from PressTV.com. Put this over here. Uh, title: China-Russia military cooperation helps end U.S. wars. Analyst. Written August 7th. All right. Article: Military cooperation between Russia and China helps put an end to U.S. wars around the world, says American political analyst Daniel Patrick Welch. The Boston based analyst was reflecting upon a new Stratford report that suggests the Chinese military is willing to help the Syrian army retake Idlib in its ongoing fight against foreign backed militants. Both China's ambassador and military attache to Syria have raised the possibility of Chinese military operations in Syria alongside the Syrian president Bashar al Assad forces. The August 3rd Stratford article quotes Ambassador Xi Jinping as saying that the Chinese military is willing to participate in some way alongside the Syrian army that is fighting the terrorists in Idlib and in any other part of Syria. Speaking to Press TV on Monday, Welch said while all talks of a possible Chinese military action in Syria had to be taken with a grain of salt, the statements were still significant. With this sign that the Chinese may be going to get actually involved, which would be a reversal or at least crack in a 50-year-old policy, is extremely significant, Welch told Press TV on Monday. The U.S. simply cannot continue to do what it wants around the world if there are military agreements with China and Russia working in tandem, he added. Russia has been running in military campaign in Syria since 2015 upon a request by Assad. Russia, Russia's military assistance, coupled with advisory help from Iran and the Lebanese resistance movement Hezbollah, has allowed Syria to purge terrorists from most of the country and bring to a halt U.S. plans to topple Assad. China, meanwhile, has increased joint military drills with China over the past years and thrown its political support behind Damascus. I think it is the best sign yet, the proof of the adage that the Chinese system needs teeth and the U.S. system needs war, Welch argued. You have trillions of dollars on the side spent in you have trillions of dollars on the side spent on infrastructure and development over the last 20 years, and trillions of dollars on the western side spent on murder and mass mayhem, he went on. It is a really good microcosm of how messed up this system is and how close we may be to seeing the sundown of the US empire, he concluded. Hmm. So what they're basically saying in this article is if if China and Russia, their militaries get um, not ramped up, but start to agree with certain countries, then their presence alone can disrupt a lot of the mayhem that the American government has been uh, guilty of in these past few years. You there? Hello, hello. All right, I think he's away.
No, I'm here.
Okay, okay.
You be writing your assessment. The problem is that United States has been a juggernaut. They've had a head start after World War II. So because of that head start, other countries had to rebuild. China had to rebuild. North Korea had to rebuild. Russia had to rebuild. Um, Germany, all the rest of these countries that would have posed a challenge to the United States had to start from scratch. So they're now caught up for the most part with the United States. I mean, they're not one to one pair, but if you put China and Russia together and you put North Korea together and you start putting Iran as well as African countries or the whole continent of Africa together, you have a big problem on your hands if you're the United States or you're a Western power.
Hmm. Agreed. That is a big problem because you can't fight a war on the many fronts. Your military is already stretched thin to begin with, and now you got more people coming to the fray to stop your um, horse horsing around. So you can't afford to do that, both financially and militarily. I agree. All right, wow, we are trucking right along here. Okay. All right, our next article is actually a YouTube video. And again, remember, if you're looking at the playback of this, you can all links to the articles and videos that we're talking about is down in the description. So you can follow along as we read them if you like. YouTube video by the Caspian Report. U.S. recognition of Israel's claim over the Golan Heights. Um, few weeks ago, I think the Golan Heights has been occupied by Israel. You mentioned for some time, but a few weeks ago we mentioned about the Golan Heights and how Israel has been continuously taking over the Golan Heights, which is a uh, geographically a part of Syria. Now, when America moved its embassy, I think consulate and embassy from no the I forgot I'm stuttering here. They recognized few months ago, weeks or month ago, they recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel by making either was it the consulate there, an embassy, and in the press conference they mentioned how they mentioned that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. They said it in passing, but so far only the U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Now they're recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel. What is going on here?
Well, they figured that the power of the United States being in a first world power position would actually give credence to the claim. In reality, it does not. If you don't have a majority of your Security Council actually agreeing on this claim, it's not going to be recognized at all. In fact, the majority of the G20 is not going to recognize it at all. Uh, at this point, this is just a political move for Israel by dragging the United States into the BS because uh, United States recognizing the Golan Heights as Israel territory puts Russia on its heels because Russia has taken has annexed the a piece of the Ukraine called the Crimea, and what that does to Russia is it forces Russia to either recognize it or abstain. Same thing with China because China claims Taiwan as a piece of China, and if China decides to recognize Golan Heights, then it's a contradiction in their partnership with Syria, as well as what it can mean for Taiwan as a country, being part of a commonwealth or a country being a part of um, China, including the Spratly Islands. If China can make claims on that, then Israel feels that well we can make claims on the Golan Heights, but the only difference here is they took it militarily from Syria. Realistically, you're not supposed to occupy territory you're not supposed to claim territory that's been occupied through war. That's actually illegal. The difference here between Russia taking Crimea is that Russia didn't take Crimea by through war. They actually had a referendum. The Spratly Islands were man-made reefs um, or islands made off of reefs by the Chinese, so it's not really much um, to argue about there. But that would be the argument that they taking these territories by force.
Okay. and no one other than the United States uh, recognizes the Golan Heights as part of Israel. Mm,
The British, you can say the same thing about the British taking the Falkland Islands. You know, the Falkland Islands are a part of Argentina. So you know, the British really don't want to get involved in that either because have they recognized the Golan Heights as being a part of Israel, then what's going to happen is that's going to spark up new political protests inside Argentina for the recognition of the Falkland Islands as being a British colony rather than it being a piece of Argentina territory.
okay. And what's the statement you said that how you can't be a part of? I think what or I forgot what organization when your territory keep your borders keep being redefined.
You can't be a part of NATO unless you have defined borders, and the problem with Israel is that their borders change by the week.
Mm, okay. I'm very sure we're going to continue to hear stories about this as we report on this. All right. Or as time goes, I'm trying to say. All right. Our next article, let's get to our next article, is from Reuters.com. Title: Russia to deploy military police on Golan Heights. Written by Dennis Pinchuk and Thomas Baum. Fourth article: Moscow. Russia will deploy its military police on the Golan Heights frontier between Syria and Israel. Its defense ministry said on Thursday after weeks of mounting volatility in the area. And as you can see, you see on the map this right here. Where my cursor is the Golan Heights. All right, let's continue with the article. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's sweeping away of rebels in southwestern Syria has worried Israel, which believes it could allow his Iranian backers to entrench their troops close to the frontier. Underlining the tensions, Israel killed 7 militants in an overnight airstrike on the Syrian-held part of the Golan Heights, Israeli radio said on Thursday. Sergei Rudskoy, a senior Russian Defense Ministry official, said that the Russian military police had on Thursday begun patrolling in the Golan Heights and planned to set up 8 observation posts in the area. He said the Russian presence there was in support of United Nations peacekeepers on the Golan Heights, who, he said, had suspended their activities in the area in 2012 because their safety was endangered. Today, UN peacekeepers, accompanied by Russian military police, conducted their first patrol in 6 years in the separation zone, Rudskoy told a briefing for journalists in Moscow. With the aim of preventing possible provocations against UN posts along the Bravo line, the deployment is planned of 8 observation posts of Russia's armed forces military police, Rudskoy said. He said the Russian presence there was temporary and that the observation posts would be handed over to Syrian government forces once the situation stabilized. The development of the Russian military police highlights the degree to which the Kremlin has become an influential actor in Middle East conflicts since its military intervention in Syria, which turned the tide of the war in Assad's favor. Israel has been lobbying the Kremlin to use its influence with Assad and with Tehran to try to get the Iranian military presence in Syria scaled back. Israel sees Iran and Iran's allies in the Hezbollah Shiite military as a direct threat to its national security. That message was conveyed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Russian President Vladimir Putin when they met in Moscow last month, a senior Israeli official said. Iranian forces have withdrawn their heavy weapons in Syria to a distance of 85 kilometers or 53 miles from the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. TASS quoted a Russian envoy as saying on Wednesday, but Israel deemed the pullback inadequate. All right. On the back of of the last article, we wrote how the U.S. is recognized the Golan Heights as part of Israel. Now you got this article by Reuters, which states Russia to deploy military police to Golan Heights. Um, how my question to you is how would America how would America react to that, and why Russia? Why would Russia be doing this?
It guarantees stability inside the restricted zones. So if they don't want Iranians there, and they don't want the Syrian government getting too close, then the best balance of power would be to put Russian police, military police in that zone. So then Israel wouldn't have to worry about tanks crossing their border, because what happened in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War, 2,000 Syrian tanks crossed that border in the middle of the night and went right into Israel and pretty much knocked Israel right on its ass. For lack of a better description, I mean, it literally took them out um, in just a few hours. So there's capabilities. Syria has capabilities to actually go in and take the Golan Heights back, but at this point they won't do it without putting up a huge fight with Israel. So rather than rather than lose Syrian soldiers and worry about Iranian um, infantrymen being inside that zone, just put Russian military police there, and that pretty much safeguards any sort of provocations that would prop up. How long they're going to be there for, who knows? I know Russia doesn't like to lose soldiers, so putting military police in that area could put them at risk for drone attacks from the United States coming out of the Mediterranean,
Mm.
or coming out of Jordan.
Now, let's say America has a drone attack on the Golan Heights, and it subsequently kills Russian military units. What 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 could escalate from that?
You could see Russia retaliate and start hitting American personnel inside of Syria. Could see Russia hit military personnel inside Iraq. There are military American assistants or American uh, military personnel sitting inside Iraq, guiding the popular mobilization units, the PMU inside Iraq, and there's 100,000 PMU members in there. You could see them flip on American soldiers. Could drag the
Mm.
United States right back into a skirmish that they don't want to get into because Trump wants to get out. And you have other naysayers within the cabinet of Trump saying we want to stay here.
Wow. I want to say hello to Anti Gravity. How you doing today?
Hey, what's going on, Noah?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Any comments on the article?
Um, just the last part that Mike mentioned in terms of being a skirmish between the U.S. and Russia. I think Trump will try to avoid that at all costs, even if it means, some Americans dying, which has already happened. I think my friend who was in the Marines, he was posting, what do you call it? Kind of like this thing where there were soldiers who got Purple Hearts, for injuries they sustained it, but it doesn't say, on what theater they got injured. So it's possibly, Syria where they got injured. Yeah, that's all I'd say.
Okay. All right. Let's get to our next article on tonight's docket. All right. This one comes from CNBC.com. And title: Apple could be used as a bargaining chip in the trade war. Chinese state media warns. All right. Article: Apple has benefited from cheap labor and a strong supply chain in China and needs to share more of its profit with the Chinese people or face anger and nationalist sentiment amid the ongoing trade war. An article in the state backed People's Daily warned Tuesday. The article originally appeared in another state backed publication, Global Times, last week. The opinion piece highlights how Apple made 9.6 billion in revenues in China in the June quarter, which helped the US giant to recently hit a $1 trillion valuation. But the continuing trade war between the US and China could leave Apple and other US firms vulnerable as bargaining chips for Beijing, according to the article. The eye catching success achieved in the Chinese market may provoke nationalist sentiment if US President Donald Trump's recently adopted protectionist measures hit Chinese companies hard, the People's Daily said. China is by far the most important overseas market for the US based Apple, leaving it exposed if Chinese people make it a target of another of anger and nationalist sentiment. China doesn't want to close its doors to Apple despite the trade conflict. But if the US company wants to earn good money in China, it needs to share its development dividends with the Chinese people. It's unclear how the publication thinks Apple should share its profits with Chinese citizens. Apple declined to comment. Last week, China said it was ready to retaliate with tariffs around 60 billion of US goods just days after the US administration revealed that Trump had spoken with US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and asked him to consider increasing the proposed levies on 200 billion of Chinese goods up to 25% from 10%. So far, Apple has been broadly insulted from the trade war. Trump reportedly told Apple CEO Tim Cook in June that iPhones assembled in China would be spared from levies. But People's Daily took issue with the economics of the iPhone. The article claimed that Chinese companies and Apple's supply chain, read that again. The article claimed that Chinese companies and Apple's supply chain only get 1.8% of total profits created by the flagship device. People's Daily did not cite where it got that figure from. Ultimately, Chinese state media argued that U.S. companies would begin to enter the firing line in the conflict between the world's two largest economies. The trade conflict initiated by the Trump administration reminds China to re-examine China-U.S. trade, People's Daily wrote. It seems U.S. companies doing business in China are the biggest winners from the China-U.S. trade. The Chinese market is vital for many top U.S. brands, giving Beijing more leeway to play hardball in the trade conflict. All right. Any comments on this one?
The People's Daily is um, a mouthpiece of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So this is them basically threatening the U.S., right, where they kind of push their people into retaliating against all American companies in the country, which they have done before. Like when they first had when they did this with Korea, when they first installed the U.S. You guys know what it's called? Kind of like the Shield ballistic missile thing. You know what it's called, Mike?
Bad.
THAAD, yes. And then also when they had like a kind of a trade dispute with Japan, they kind of put that out onto their, the People's Daily, the South China Morning Post, that kind of their mouthpiece newspapers, and people started destroying their Japanese-made products and overturning police cars that were made in Japan. So you can see a lot of that happening soon.
Hmm.
Well, it's been widely known that they would actually use Apple. That Apple would fall into the middle of all of this because their goods are made there. They've been exempt from all of the tariffs, so it makes sense that they've been maximizing their profits in China and not sharing anything. Same thing happened, I think, in Ireland, where Apple had stashed a lot of their tax revenue inside Ireland as a write off or as a shelter, and they weren't sharing it with the government itself. So they've been having to repay back little by little, due to the WTO finding out what Apple was doing. So Apple does have a lot of money, but that's because they haven't been paying their taxes and they haven't been sharing their wealth with anybody, not even their employees. Um,
Wow. Okay.
so it's only a matter of time before most of these countries that Apple has been operating in start asking for a piece of that $1 trillion evaluation that they've been having that they've had since last week. So they can only get away for so long. I don't think they can keep ignoring this and not having a PR person come out and say anything. But if they decide to come out with a car, an Apple car, then it's game over. Other countries that have been screwed over in the past by Apple will eventually start asking for some of this revenue.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think they're going to try to use Apple as pressure against the U.S. government because Apple does a lot of lobbying on Congress. So once Apple right now is just kind of like bluster, but once they actually really start to take action against Apple, then you're going to see Apple putting pressure on the Trump administration and Republicans and Democrats in Congress to do something about this.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, China can make their own competitive product to the iPhone, and they've been very successful with the Huawei as well as the Oppo. One phone that I actually have, and for disclaimer, is the One Plus, which is a Hong Kong design phone, but it's still Chinese for the most part, and it's a very competitive product to the iPhone itself. The facial recognition used to unlock the phone is actually faster than that on the iPhone, and it's an Android-based device. They also have their own operating systems that they've developed that are somewhat feasible for those who can't afford an iPhone in itself. And you see a lot of these Chinese-made phones coming out that are very similar in design to an iPhone and give you that same build quality without actually having to pay the Apple tax. So even if Apple decides to pull out, where are they going to go? Where are you going to find another factory that's fully equipped and designed from the ground up to actually build your products in the same way that the Chinese factories are?
All right. All right. Any rebuttals, Anti?
No, he makes good points.
All right. All right.
But I just want to take a 1 second to actually give Farrell a big shout out for joining.
All right. How you doing, Pharaoh? How you doing? Welcome to the Black Brain Trust. Hope this is not your only visit on the side of Black YouTube. All right. The last article on the docket today comes from CNBC.com, titled U.S. Nuclear Sanctions on Iran Officially Resume, written by Tom DeChristopher, written August 6th. Article: The first round of U.S. nuclear sanctions on Iran officially snapped back into place on Tuesday, and although that turn of events pales in comparison to a raft of penalties yet to come, experts say it sends a clear signal that Washington is willing to pummel the Iranian economy. President Donald Trump gave banks and companies 90 days to prepare for the return of some sanctions after he abandoned the 2015 Iran nuclear deal in May. Since then, Iran's currency, the rial, has plummeted and the Iranian economy is faltering, sparking protests around the country. The Trump administration is wagering that the sanctions can pile enough pressure on Iran that they will lead to a better deal than President Barack Obama secured, even though Obama enforced the same penalties and marshaled far more international support for them. I am pleased that many international firms have already announced their intent to leave the Iranian market, and several countries have indicated that they will reduce or end imports of Iranian crude oil. Trump said in a statement on Monday, we urge all nations, quote, we urge all nations to take such steps to make clear that the Iranian regime faces a choice: either change its threatening, destabilizing behavior and reintegrate with the global economy, or continue down a path of economic isolation, end quote. Under the 2015 agreement, the international community lifted wide-ranging sanctions on Iran in exchange for oil-rich Middle Eastern country accepting limit in exchange for the oil-rich Middle Eastern country accepting limits on its nuclear program. The Trump administration wants Iran to accept a dozen additional concessions. One of the things I've heard an awful lot of over the course of the last couple of months is whether or not this is still all whether or not this is still all a feint and all intended to rejuvenate the diplomatic process that had otherwise been stalled, said Richard Nephew, the lead sanctions expert to the U.S. team that negotiated the nuclear deal. I think that come Monday, a lot of that speculation, a lot of that wishful thinking will have been put to rest when those sanctions are back in place. Nephew, now a senior research scholar at Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy, said during a conference call with reporters. The initial volley of sanctions aims to block the Iranian government from accessing U.S. dollars, making significant real transactions, maintaining overseas bank accounts, or issuing sovereign debt. Iran also faces renewed barriers to transacting in gold, precious metals, and other commodities like graphite and types of aluminum and steel. Those measures weren't designed to level a hammer blow. Excuse me. Those measures weren't designed to level a hammer blow at Iran's economy, but to close loopholes that would help Tehran evade sanctions on Iran's lifeblood energy resource, according to Nephew. For that reason, their impact on the Iranian economy will be limited, Nephew said. But the end of the 90-day grace period does contain some measures which will have a direct impact on Iran's economy, namely sanctions on Iran's automotive and civil aviation sectors. The automotive industry in the nation's biggest is the nation's biggest employer after the energy sector, and the government had plans to ramp up production in coming years. But the sanctions have forced European automakers like Puget, Puget to suspend investments in Iran. Similarly, the sanctions dashed a 20 billion deal to sell Boeing aircraft to Iran and threatened to wipe out billions in orders for Airbus. Iran's ancient fleet of air carriers is notorious for its high accident rate. Against that backdrop, European countries trying to salvage the nuclear deal have been seeking to temper Iran's expectations for the benefit of Accord, for the benefits the Accord can deliver, said Jared Blanc, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, who oversaw U.S. commitment to the agreement in the Obama administration. The U.S. sanctions are most effective on big multinational companies because Washington can use them to lock companies out of the American market. If companies don't do much business with the U.S., They have little to lose by trading with Iran, though they need a bank willing to process the transactions. The question boils down to whether Iran can continue to sell enough oil and sustain enough trade with small and mid-sized firms to avoid recession, Blanc told reporters on the conference call. There are questions that have much more to do with Iran's non-European trading partners, so India, China, and the rest, he said. The Europeans have a role to play here, but it's by no means the largest role. China is refusing to cut off purchases of Iranian oil but will not significantly increase imports. Bloomberg News reported on Friday. India is reportedly warning its refiners to prepare to reduce their purchases, but analysis says it remains something of a wild card. The main challenge will be the Asian hydrocarbon economies, said Vietnam Ben Talablu, research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. One of the issues with the way the U.S. left the nuclear deal is that the bulk of our attention has been on managing the European partners. Taylor Blue, who supports the pursuit of a tougher deal, says the Trump administration must be on guard against giving too much leeway to countries like China, India, and Turkey, because the impact of the sanctions relies on tough implementation. The State Department said in June it was pushing oil buyers to cut imports of Iranian crude to zero by November 4th, but cabinet officials have since said some countries could get waivers to reduce purchases more gradually. Even a little bit of reduction from China may not be enough to put pressure on Iran, Taylor Blue said, noting that Chinese imports of Iranian crude have risen since 2015. That's the trap we don't want to fall in with China. All right, with that article, with that read, I want to open the mic for open mic. Any comments on that article? Anybody?
Well, I guess they think that putting pressure on these other countries is going to make them actually, conform, and that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to find out back doors, um, continue doing these deals without actually being punished. And just to correct you, the name of that company is not Peugeot; it's actually Peugeot. It's a
Pooja.
French, it's a French car company. Um, these car, these companies already signed deals inside Iran, and now this guy, this tangerine tyrant comes into the White House and decides that he's gonna reverse all these deals because he says so, because he doesn't like the deal. There's billions of dollars tied up in this, and people aren't gonna, these companies and these nation states are not gonna be okay just because the tangerine tyrant says so. What I will say is this: I think this is going to speed up the process for blockchain development as well as cryptocurrencies in Iran in order to bypass any sort of Wall Street, DC, London, London stock exchange, where money needs to be passed in order to pay these people. That you can put sanctions on these people or tariffs on these people for doing business with Iran. It's not going to happen anymore. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. This was overall getting out of this agreement was a bad idea because this kind of puts the Europeans in a position where it's you either trade with us or you trade with the Iranians. And since the Iranians are already following this deal, and it wasn't a bilateral U.S. Iran deal, this was I think between 6 countries. Is this correct?
Yeah, I think so. It wasn't in 6 countries. It was France, German, the UK, India, and Russia, China, and America, right?
Yeah, I think it might have been all those countries. So if the Europeans leave, the Chinese will just come in, which they've already started to do. because the Chinese aren't under the same, restrictions. They have a lot of state-owned banks, state-owned firms that don't do any business with the U.S., so they have no exposure on that side. So they can invest, as much as they want. And even if the U.S., does anything, they're still going to do it regardless. So there's just a lot of money on the table for the Chinese and the Europeans, Chinese and the Russians and the Indians to take.
Yeah, and keep in mind that you have environmental engineers, nuclear scientists. There's a lot of high tech jobs on the line now that these nation states and these companies are doing, have their human resources tied up in. And for some guy in the White House to say, "Well, I forbid you," that's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Take a hike. I mean, and this could escalate because you play games with Iran and they'll shut down the Straits of Hormuz, which is right now they're having military exercises inside the Straits of Hormuz as well, inside the Persian Gulf. So they're getting ready. They're prepping up right now that in case something does happen, their people are ready on the front line to shut down that whole entire operation.
Okay. I forgot what I was going to say. The deal that was backed out, that Trump backed out of, was called the JCPOA, right?
Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I'm okay. Yeah. Anything else you all want to bring up? Open mic night now.
I was actually going to bring up the Zimbabwe election and how opposition members are being killed during that process, and that's the first time that's happened in the last couple of decades. So,
wow. Yeah, we can hit that up then. Wrap it up after that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Let me see if I can find the article and paste it in the.
Man, I didn't know that one.
Right. They're basically saying it was a rigged election for what's his name, Emerson Mnangagwa.
That's whew, boy. So how you doing today, Noah?
Been pretty busy. How about you guys? Other than that, not too bad.
Yeah, I got some things done today. Learning as the days go.
I dropped a link.
There it goes. Let me just bring that up. Oops, I forgot to share my screen. All right. Boom. All right. The last article, my cursor, there it goes. The last article on the docket comes from Newsweek.com, titled Zimbabwe Elections, Detainments, Beatings Force Opposition Activists into Hiding as Violence Continues. Written by Daniel Moritz Rabson on August 8th. Article. Excuse me. Hundreds of activists have been forced into hiding as Zimbabwe's security agencies clamp down on protests related to the country's contentious elections. Security forces have harassed activists and leaders supporting the opposition MDC alliance as violence related to the contested election results continues. The Guardian reported over the weekend, soldiers in the country's capital of Harare destroyed opposition supporters' property. The army has a list, and I am on it. 21-year-old student leader Ashley Pufunier told the newspaper, I rang my mom to tell her she would not hear from me for a while, and went underground. It was a hard call to make. I don't know when we'll speak again. If I'm found, I will disappear, and it might be forever. I am frightened, but it is what politics here in Zimbabwe is all about. Clashes broke out before the results were announced, with soldiers and police facing, clashes broke out before the results were announced, with soldiers and police facing off against protesters who say plots were rigged, polls were rigged. 6 people were killed last week when soldiers fired on MDC Alliance protesters in Harare. Meanwhile, police are looking for 9 opposition officials who they allege who they allege incited violence. And this is the first time this has happened uh, in Harare. You say?
Was that for me or for Mike?
Oh, I might.
Not the first time it's happened, but it's been a while. Since they've had any uprisings like this before. Usually the elections go the way of Mugabe anyway. So when you have political opposition now starting to put up a fight, I think the problem is that the ZANU-PF party wants to maintain their presence inside the capital.
It's a shame, man. I mean, this is a shame because I feel that whoever wins is going to turn to a dictator and some type of tyrant.
I think it's been like that for a while now.
Yeah, what that was with Mugabe. Now you got another person. It's just gonna continue to be like that. Uh, you it paints a bad picture, or even worse picture for African countries where you can't even have peaceful elections. You resort to killing. I don't know how many African countries have resorted to that because people can't take a L. It's too much. It's too much.
Well, you have the same thing in the United States. I mean, you have people on social media talking about even if you are right, even if you are democratically right, you can't beat me outside.
Yeah, and it's a lot of them.
Actually, that did happen. I think last night, actually, in Ohio's, I want to say, 3rd or 12th district, where a Republican, he just basically claimed the victory, even though it was too close to really declare who won. He just kind of said, "Oh, I won." So the Democratic candidate right now, he's kind of suing for a recount or something like that. It's basically what Bush did. So
yeah, back in 2001.
Yeah. Well, and you know what I found out later on is that the guy who was on Fox that called, or I should say the independent vote caller or whatever they wanted to call him, that was on Fox that night was actually Bush's cousin who called the election, even though it's still too close to count. And Gore ended up winning Florida anyway, which was travesty.
You mean Jeb Bush?
No, a cousin of Bush, of George Bush's. I don't know what his name is. I can't think of his name.
I don't know if Africa can accept democracy because there's so many tribes. It's so tribal over there that one tribe doesn't want to be under the other. So there has to be some kind of other form of political structure that satisfies the surrounding tribes. I don't think democracy works.
I agree with you on that because that's often the
You there, Lionel? Yeah, I'm broke up. Hello.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with his internet connection. Did he drop?
It kind of looks like it. But yeah, I think maybe they should look for a different model that isn't, democracy. Democracy isn't necessarily for everyone, right? Every country has a right to, choose their own path.
It seems like that for the whole continent, though, not just Zimbabwe. It seems like the whole continent doesn't really like democracy too much in that regard, because when their tribe loses, they go berserk.
Right, that's a good point.
You would need something similar to Black Panther, where you have a governing council.
Well, that's actually what a lot of the governing system used to be, pre-colonial, and even to a lesser extent today as well. I can't really think of an example right now, but yeah, kind of tribalism and clanism really takes a toll on the different countries, because no one wants to be, I guess, not in power, right? Because they feel like if my tribe is not in politics, my needs won't be satisfied.
Right, and we saw the same thing in Egypt under Morsi, where politically speaking, the Egyptian military did not agree with Morsi's victory, so they got rid of him really fast.
For that one, I think that might have been just a little bit different. I think they were against him because he was from the Muslim Brotherhood more so than, because they didn't agree. Well, actually, yeah, what you said, but more so because he was from the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, they don't. That sort of tribalism doesn't allow for a democratic process to take place.
No, I kind of meant it more in the way of, their American handlers won't allow a former Muslim Brotherhood member to be the head of the country, even though most of the country voted for him.
Right. And now they have nothing, find that to be very interesting, because now you don't have any political process.
The funny thing is how inept, Abdel Fattah Sisi is. They kind of broadcasted. I don't know if you remember this. I think it was a few years ago. They broadcasted, something that they shouldn't have on like live television. Basically, they kind of planned their coup on live television.
Really?
Yeah. It's funny. But that's all I have to say.
But did you hear what we were talking about, Lionel?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you all was talking about what I was talking about, the different tribes and how they don't want to be, they don't want one particular tribe to have majority representation in politics. They are out of power. They don't have no say so, and they feel they may. Go ahead.
No, we were actually talking about Egypt.
Yeah, that I heard. That
Okay.
I heard. Yeah. But I agree with you. Democracy, it looks for years doesn't work because of the tribalism.
Right, and they need some kind of governing council. I mean, that's the only way that. I mean, you have the African Union, but that only speaks for the continent, not for every particular country.
Mm-hmm.
Even in Libya, Libya really didn't have any elections. They just had Gaddafi as the head, and that was it. And even he didn't want to claim to be the leader. He's saying that, he's not the leader. He's just the, I guess, the figurehead of
the face of Libya.
Yeah, he didn't want to claim to be the leader.
Okay.
It's good, gentlemen.
What's going on?
What's going on, man?
What's up, Ulysses?
So what do you think would be a better system?
A better system?
Yes.
In terms of
the political structure in different African countries.
you have to have an equal system, right? You have to have some system where everybody benefits and everybody has a seat at the table, and that's pretty much how a democracy is run. But the problem is, most of these tribes don't want to, either they don't get along with rival tribes to the point where they don't want to even have entertain that sort of conversation, or um, the greed actually keeps them in power because they may be sitting on some form of natural resource that actually props them up.
Mm.
Yeah, I was going to give my 2 cents on that. I mean, I think just outside observer, democracy kind of works when you have a robust employment sector, right? Because typically Democrats are people who vote in favor of like job security, job growth, wages, all that kind of stuff. I mean, you just look at America and you see who your Democrat class is. These are largely workers. Okay, and then your Republicans largely are going to be like your industrialists and your and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. That's kind of how it shakes out. So in Africa, just from my observation, they don't have a middle class that's largely composed of employable people that have varied skill sets, degrees, and all that kind of stuff, and their skill sets and talents support like a robust corporate structure in Africa. I mean, Africa is largely in development, so it's really not to the point where you have that. It's kind of still down in the levels of tribalism, as Mike was referring to, tribalism and that line of thought, monarchies and tribal kings and shamanism, and what I mean. I'm not trying to paint that in some sort of like primitive light. It's just that when you think of democracy, you don't.
Hello?
You there, you?
Yeah. You guys hear me?
You cut out that last bit.
Oh, I was just saying, like you can't really draw a correlation. Oh, I don't know what the feedback's coming from. I think it's no. Okay. No, I was just saying, like, you can't really draw like a correlation to like democratic policy, right? And then tribalist policy. Like there's a lot of juxtaposition there. Actually, there's not much synergy. So they have to move up from like a tribalist mind state and a way of functioning in terms of a society into more of a democratic type society, which would mean that a lot of those people are like they're employed by companies and stuff.
But don't you guys think that democracy is kind of like a like a Western ideology, that they need something that comes from Africa instead of democracy being imposed? You know what I mean?
That I agree with. There has to be something that comes from the country in which democracy is, and in this case, is Africa.
Or at the very least, it should be modified. Like, for example, when the Chinese first took communism from the Russians, they changed it. What's the phrasing they gave it? Communism with Chinese characteristics. So they kind of fit that model to their culture, right? So, and a lot of times whenever, European countries go to, whether it's Latin America, Africa, Asia, they kind of try to impose their version of, Western liberal democracy on a people who either don't want it or it doesn't fit their culture.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see something similar happening here in the U.S., like the face of what is typically thought of to be democratic, it kind of spans the spectrum now, right? Because now a true Democrat technically is considered to be a socialist by, your Bernie Sanders, Alexandria, Ocasio-Cortez standards. So, or even him for that matter. So, I mean, we even see it kind of morphing and changing here, right? So I don't see why Africa or Africans couldn't create their variant of democracy, right, to suit them.
Well, first, I'd
What's
like to say
going on?
first,
How you doing, ago?
what's up?
What's
What's up,
good,
fellas?
Nego?
What's going on, brothers? What's going on? I see
Good.
you guys are deep into this. First of all, I'd like to see, Bernie Sanders. He says he's a straight up socialist, democratic socialist. That's how he categorizes himself. Most African countries, as they went, a lot of them went to freedom or got freedom, certainly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They considered themselves to be democratic socialist countries, a lot of them, and they were, I think some of them really came underneath attack from the CIA and so forth because of their more socialist types of leanings. That's something that we
Yeah, I know we got feedback.
I got a lot of feedback. That's okay, yeah. So that seems to be a big part, but I don't know what kind of role that's playing now so much on the continent. Seems like Ghana and these other countries seem to be pretty much democratic elected governments, but I don't know how long that's going to last, or kind of what kind of role is our government playing in shifting the political environment to these countries. Still to this day, it's that I'm kind of interested in maybe looking at that or seeing what people feel about that as well.
Actually, you bring up an excellent point, Nagon. A lot of the African countries actually were, their cultures were more in line with, the Soviet Union and their, brand of, socialism than a lot of the other Western countries, democracies. So there's something to be said about, Africans being, generally socialist, in a way.
Well, we have to keep in mind that Western countries were capitalists and African countries were not. So their democratic ideals are going to be based around propping up the best interests of pale-faced people. Whereas in Africa, you really didn't have that sort of economic system in place to begin with. And when you think about Africa today, the continent as a whole, it's only recently that they've gotten out of colonialism. Even when you go back to like Mugabe, it's only been since 1980 since he's been in power.
Yeah.
It's only been 35 something years. United States has had 200 years to play footsies with capitalism and democracy, and it's worked in their favor up until 2008.
That's true. I mean, the United States is one of the oldest, even though it's a newer country as far as the nation is concerned. It definitely has one of the oldest governments actually in the world. So yeah, it's an excellent point, Mike.
Yeah, I agree with you all saying. Yes, I agree. I remember reading Shaking Out to Joe's book how the cultural oneness in Africa. Yes, African culture does have a socialistic point to them. This hyper capitalistic American way of living is dangerous to African culture because in this hyper capitalistic way of living, you have to have an underclass, and in Africa, that underclass may be an entire tribe of people. It may be an entire tribes of people where few tribes are on top, a few tribes are on the bottom, and that type of environment is going to create wars and infighting within countries. So this hyper capitalistic way of living here is not good for African countries.
No, it's toxic, and you see it replicated within the black community. You got people who can barely afford to pay bills, and they out there buying Jordans, or they're going out there to buy these big spinning wheels on Cadillacs and things of that nature. Meanwhile, they can't even do their own taxes. So there's a financial literacy problem, economic literacy problem, as well as a political literacy problem amongst African Americans. So even democracy doesn't even work here because, like I said earlier, we've heard on other hangouts where even if you're democratically right, you still can't whip my ass. So therefore, you're not really right.
And what it's an important point you brought up. I don't care how much Black Americans or African Americans, however you want to put it, say, "Oh, we're not African." You are. Those traits that those systems we live by in our neighborhoods. I'm not talking about the negative, the killings. Those systems we live by in our neighborhoods come from somewhere, and they come from somewhere. So we are the canary in the coal mine when it comes to how to run an African country, a continental African country and society. We are the canary in the coal mine. If it's not going to work for us, what makes you think? How in the world do you think is going to work for them? It's going to be even worse because there's more of them.
Well, we can look at it a different way as well. We weren't supposed to be here to begin with.
Hmm.
So while we're a part of the historic fabric of the nation itself, we still don't have representation within political office today. You can see that out of 2,000 members of Congress and politicians within this country, black people. There's only about 3 or 4 black politicians that have been recently elected. I mean, we don't really have a whole lot of representation for us, democratically speaking, and the ones who should be in power or should be running, we've marginalized those people. We called them educated lames. We called them.
Well, yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that we've marginalized those very people from our communities, and then you have nothing. So we say, well, democracy, democracy doesn't work for us in the same way it doesn't work for Africans, and it's a little bit different. It's a bit of a nuance.
You got a lot of noise.
Yeah, I think we. Wait. Okay. I was gonna say, I think largely black folks in America shoot themselves in the foot. I don't think the problem is. I think it's more insular than it is external. There's external components to it, but again, I make the argument that there's not a group on this planet that doesn't have external threats. Okay, this is just the nature of human nature. Let's just call it that. So in my view, it's sort of like you match wits. You match whatever it is that comes your way, right? In order to ensure not only your survival but your success, right? So even if that means like an updated, more modern mode of thinking in order to accommodate today's situation and circumstance, so be it. Every other group is going to possess that mandate at the end of the day. We see that. We see those who crypto markets and are largely hodlers and investors and people who engage in it, and then you have other groups of people because in their minds they can see this doesn't jive with who I culturally am and who I've always been. I mean, look, you have to view things in the modern context, like where you're at today. You're not going to go back to some primitive time, some tribalistic time. It's not going to. The only way that's going to happen is we bomb each other to oblivion. Okay, then yeah, right. But I don't know. All signs kind of point to an even more move towards a technological. So it's really just kind of like a make your mind up. For me, anyway, that's how I do it.
I don't think we're saying that we need to go back to a primitive mind set, but there are things in a person's culture that's innate. I'll give an example. Forcing Chinese culture on entire African continent, it won't work. It's not going to work.
Well, I don't think the China. Well, you're saying that's what the Chinese are doing now?
No, I'm not saying that's what they're doing now. I'm just saying, as an example, enforcing another culture on you can see it. You can see it play out in America. You take a Muslim culture such as Iran or Saudi Arabia, just like the article we went over earlier, how the Canadian, I think the Canadian Prime Minister talked.
Justin Trudeau.
No,
No, it's the Canadian ambassador to Saudi Arabia.
Canadian ambassador. She opened her mouth about human rights in Saudi Arabia. Whole culture doesn't stand in Saudi Arabia. That doesn't mean it's primitive. It's just another culture. What I'm trying to get at is this.
Oh, you're making a hell of a point. You're making an excellent point right there. I'm following right along what you're saying.
Well,
no, good.
Great point. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is this: Africa was colonized, colonialized for hundreds of years. Africa had its own way of doing things. If you read the travels of, I forgot the guy's travel off the top of my head, but he was saying these people don't steal. If someone steals, they're going to be dealt with. So we already had our way of living that was conducive to us.
That doesn't support the slave trade narrative, right?
What do you mean?
So didn't we supposedly sell each other into slavery? And
well,
to say that warfare, tribalism, all these things weren't existing on the continent, I don't know. I think that might be a little bit disingenuous. I mean, he could have been talking to a specific group.
Yeah, he was.
But that doesn't speak to Africa writ large, right?
Yeah.
I don't know who the author you're speaking about, but things like stealing, corruption, for the majority of the continent, really that kind of stuff didn't really exist.
And that's what I'm saying. Yes, there were infighting. It's well known when at the Berlin Conference, when the Europeans drew the imaginary borders, they put groups that were at odds with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
in the same country. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, it wasn't. Come on, now, to this level.
No. I just want to say this. He's hitting it right on the head, because I'm forgetting the authors right now, but he wrote this back in 14. It was when they first came in here, 1494. When they came back, it was a Portuguese traveler, and when they came back in 1506, they attacked. They basically attacked where currently Ghana is, but excuse me, not Ghana, but Angola and then Mozambique, as they went through. But what Lionel just said was, when they first went to that continent, they started looking at what was going on. They had bazaars where there was gold and everything else like that. People could take a break, go eat, come back, and not one piece of gold cash was touched. Nothing. Mm-hmm. They didn't have crime. They didn't have criminality and savagery like the Europeans and them brought over, and then basically corrupted, and infected the continent. But that's exactly how they were. They were very peaceful and very and they had wars, but even their nature of war was not as savage as how whites were. They actually credited someone like Shaka Zulu for actually changing, kind of how war was fought in Southern Africa, for hundreds of years. He kind of upgraded them to a more difficult, savage way of fighting. But
and it wasn't just Africa. It was Native Americans. It was other people around the world that didn't have this hyper killing going on.
Very much so.
Right. No. And look. All of these points are taken, but this is the reason why I'm a strong proponent of like the current modern time, right? Because what it is that we're supposed to kind of aggregate all of history, learn from it, synthesize it, and then apply it to today, right? What positions you to be most successful in today's environment, right? That's essentially what we are to be doing, because we can't travel back in time, right? We can muse about it all night long. We can discuss all of the various details and facts and figures and all of that. However, we find ourselves here today, in August of 2018, right? So what all I'm saying is that like that has to be created in real time. What you're talking about in terms of like, okay, what a democracy for Africa looks like. Okay, it's not going to be what's traditionally been in the past. That's not going to be the case. It's not going to be the westernized version of what we are discussing. Like, because now we're saying, okay, how do we transpose a Western concept for civilization onto?
I think what he's saying is it's going to be an Africanized type.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Like the Chinese. Yeah. The example he brings up a great example of the Chinese. The Chinese, they're supposed to be a communist country, but they're not communist. They're a Chinese country. So they take whatever this communist socialist view is, and they made it a Chinese.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to expound African history and say, well, we did this and we did that. No, what I'm saying is, yes, we were this way and something disrupted that. Find out what disrupted that, understand it, and root out that which disrupted it, and let's go back to our innate, not ancient, but innate African way of understanding each other, dealing with each other, and trading with
right. I think I might have something to add on that. So during my time looking through, African history, the various countries, originally I used to think, okay, democracy is not going to work there. I think maybe the strongman model is maybe the best model. But as I looked more into it, it's not really a resource problem. It's not necessarily even a leadership problem. It's an institutions problem, right? So if the country is able, a lot of these African countries, they're able to build strong institutions like court systems, police systems, justice systems, and in a way of assessing, a way of creating a leadership in the country and a board of governance. A lot of the things like corruption, things like interethnic conflict and violence, a lot of that will, be reduced, right? For example, take a look at Botswana, right? Of all the African countries, it's probably one of the most peaceful. There hasn't been a war there, I think, since independence. They have a thriving economy, and they don't have a democracy, but they have a way of picking leaders and dealing with conflicts as they arise in an effective enough manner that it doesn't get out of control, right? So I see that as more of a better model because it comes from the people, and it's not a democracy or a communism that's imposed from foreign people.
No,
the system of governance that they have right now is something that they've chose for themselves.
No.
Well, I was going to say now that was
it's an African way, right? It's an African way. Am I correct?
What was that?
Would we say that it's an African way of doing things for them?
Right.
Would we be correct in saying that?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is, it's the African way, given that they're African people, right?
Well,
if you were in Europe and this is what you wanted, would you call it the European way? You were in whatever continent.
I think so.
Right. So the point that I'm getting at here is this is all based on the determination of the collective as a whole, type of society they choose to exist in, right? They also are going to determine the level of modernity, right? How much Western influence, how much technology they're going to allow to influence their culture.
Well. I mean, that distinction there: modernity and Western and technology, because the Africans had technology, and then they were able to integrate that technology into their African, customs and culture, right? So we should make that distinction.
Mm-hmm. But I mean that's the integration. That would be modernity, right? Your ability to coexist and integrate with.
I just wanted to make sure distinction.
Oh yeah.
We don't say technology is Western, right?
No. What I'm saying is when I talk about modernity, right? you could have people who are perfectly okay. And again, I'm not saying this to disparage. I'm trying to make distinctions here, right? So we have to understand that certain living systems are going to apply for certain groups of people. Other living systems aren't going to apply to certain groups of people. Now, we can use America as a microcosm, right? Because even though this is supposedly a democracy, depending on who you ask, it's actually either a plutocracy, a corporatocracy, it's socialism, it's it can be any depending, right? Oligarch, depending on who you ask, right? See, so all I'm saying is that, when I speak of modernity, I'm literally being at synergy with the times, right? From a global standpoint. I understand that some places are just out of reach to us, and then other places where we're out of reach to them. This spans the scope of and how it is that we're coexisting here. So whatever we'll agree to that is most suitable for them in this particular standpoint in time, I would say that that's going to be the best mode. And if it means, again, Lionel touched on this, and I touched on it earlier, democracy, but extrapolating from it, like getting rid of the stuff that you say, okay, look, I look at what that's done to Americans, dude, and we don't want no part of that. Get rid of that then. Use the parts that are going to work for you. And that's what I'm talking about, literally creating it to fit today's context. I'm not even sure you would even call it democracy. It might be some new name. After they put it all together and create it, it's probably something that doesn't, just like how we're coming up with democratic socialists. What does that mean?
It's to separate themselves from the democratic corporatists. So the ones who are paid by mega corporations such as Amazon and AT&T and whatnot, and
right,
that's a way for differentiating themselves. But what happens when you start talking about black people in America? Where do we stand politically as to our existence within this country? We have people who don't believe that going back to Africa makes any sense to them, that we should wait for reparations, whereas black people black people on this panel still believe that Africa, that has 1.2 billion people and growing, has strong political presence as well as economic and financial technological presence that can be utilized to expand your operations in terms of the political sphere.
Exactly. And even you can take what's going on in the American government and even apply it, the concept, to African country. When I say that, I know it's not perfect, and I know they may not be doing, they may be saying it, but have each race of people represented. Now take that concept to Africa. You may have to expand the number of seats in your parliament if you choose to keep the predefined borders of your country, Kenyan borders, Somali borders, Ugandan, Rwandan borders. If you choose to keep those borders, you have to understand, okay, we have X number of tribes in our country, such as Kenya. I think they have 42 recognized tribes in their country. Okay, if you want each tribe to hold a number of seats in your parliament, then you have to expand the number of seats in the parliament, just like what Paul Kagame is doing in Rwanda. Half of the parliament have to be women. So you have to make policies to reflect that, and I believe that may cut down on a lot of the infighting.
So I mean, many people have said, some corporations are too big to fail. Is the black community too small to save?
That's a good question.
Good question.
Wait, say that again, Mike.
That many people have said some of these corporations are too big to fail. But when you look at the black community, do you think that the black community is too small to save?
Do I think it's too small to save?
No, I would say the black community has a certain financial element to it that is exploitable, and I believe people are going to want to, I believe people are going to want to keep that around for that. Whether you having power in these kind of things is what they don't want, but having you around for exploitation is quite profitable.
Well, you can only be exploited if you allow yourself to be exploited.
And we're doing a lot of allowing right now. A lot of allowing.
So let's this again, man. I don't really.
Yeah, I disagree with what Ulysses just said. That's not the only way. You said you can only be exploited if you allow yourself to be exploited.
I mean, you can. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say there are some instances where people don't even know they're being exploited.
Yeah, true.
What? So wait. So you mean like if you work for somebody, for example?
No, not specifically that. I'm saying in general, people may not know they're being exploited. I
mean when you say that, like, what do you mean? Like what degree? Like, okay. I mean,
if your face is not on the money, then you may not know you're being exploited.
I mean, because if that's the case, then I guess, right? I guess if that's the case, sure. I'll buy that.
You may go through life, living life, and you think, okay, since I was brought up this way, this is the way of doing things. Okay, I'll give you an example. Buying material things as a way to show wealth.
Okay.
You're being exploited by companies, and you're being brainwashed by television.
No, you're being marketed to.
So you're saying that's
no one put a gun to your head to buy that shit. You got marketed to. You bought into the hype. You bought it. Look, man. That's sometimes people buyers are. It's not exploitation.
You can be exploited. They even talked about subliminal messages in these advertisements and all this kind of stuff, which actually affects your subconscious mind to make you buy and so forth. Yeah, I think you can.
It's called. Look, it's called. Okay. Wait. You want to? Look. Where's Preem? Where's Preem when we need him? Okay, one man's exploitation is. I guess. I mean, like, it really just kind of depends on what side of the fence you fall, right? I mean, because look. I'm not gonna look at a commercial, right, and then just be like, oh, I need a Dr. Pepper, and then go and do it. Dude, I'll go get a Dr. Pepper if I want. I'm not gonna do it because I watched a commercial.
I don't necessarily.
Snobbish. That's pretty snobbish.
It's very snobbish, dude. It really is, dude. I'm not even gonna lie with you.
Okay, I can give you an example of an exploitation that you don't choose. For example, let's say, if you take not just redlining, but also banks refusing to give you a loan because you're black, right? Or they'll give you higher interest rates.
That's right.
Even though someone else with a different name, that is.
Hey,
is getting
is that illegal, or is that?
And
what was I going to say? Is it
got was an $11 million fine last year? They're still doing it today, 2017.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is that exploitation, or is that systemic racism?
Well, they're both the same, right? Systemic racism.
Well, no. Systemic racism allows for exploitation.
Greater profit.
Systemic racism allows because that's policy. Policy allows for that, right?
No, I think Lionel, what he's just saying is that some exploitation people choose, right? Because they're lazy or they don't, know, or they choose it willingly. And then some exploitation, happens to them because either, they're black or because it's not their choice, right?
The fact of the matter is that there's levels to exploitation, right? There's being subjected to, like I said, because at the very basis of it all, you're saying that being subjected to marketing is a form. And what I'm saying is that, well, when the buyer has the right to make a purchase or not, well, I don't know. That's kind of that's a call. That's a call that person has to make. Now, I understand exploitation that happens as a result of racism. I get that. I get that. There's no way around that. But when you say I got marketed to and then I went and bought some Jordans and now I feel exploited. No, that was a purchase. That was a buyer's choice. And
exploited
a certain
means
level
being taken advantage of. Being taken advantage of.
I know, but what I'm saying is that's exploited. I know, but let's make the distinction though, because if it's systemic, then that's something that number one, you have no control over. That has to be fought and it has to be addressed and fought.
Nah, man. It's just like with the loans, with the home, with the housing loan scam and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of exploitation goes on. People get exploited.
But you're not following me.
Many different levels.
But you're not following.
So
what I'm saying with regards to that, what I'm saying, as a result of systemic racism. Okay. Well, you can't lump that nation in the same category with just marketing, right? Like you can't say that, oh, well, Nike is just as complicit in my exploitation as Goldman Sachs is. Bullshit, dude. You have a choice in whether you go buy some damn Jordans versus where you need a roof over your head.
Oh,
you don't need Jordans.
So you're saying
that you have a choice to what bank you can go to as well.
You do.
I just have one question. So you're saying hyper.
I'm not really following your argument too well, but you know.
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm just saying. Listen. Go ahead, Noah.
So you're saying, hyper consumerism of the, American brand that's in the, Black community. That is a form of, you're saying that's an exploitation that they've chosen, right? Versus systemic racism, which is an exploitation they didn't choose. Is that what you're getting at?
I think there's a difference between being marketed to and then being subjected to policy. There's a difference. One, you make a choice. The other one, you don't have a choice.
I think they could be one and the same.
Yeah, I agree.
One and the same a great deal.
Yeah,
You're not forced to buy a pair of Jordans. You're not forced.
Yeah. I understand what Ulysses is saying, and he does have a point. But I think what Nagone is saying is actually on point as well. The problem is it's the same thing with the cigarette still, right? So cigarette companies are banned from actually advertising because they're actually exploiting the teens and the minors to buy these cancer sticks to
that's right
for consumption. But public policy allowed it for it to happen. However, public policy also disallowed for it to happen. So there are some similarities in terms of systemic racism and marketing aspect. So we still see gun advertisements, by major manufacturers, exploiting the insecurities of white people to go out and purchase a gun because some would-be black male may come through their window when 90% of the white violence is coming from other white people. They don't actually.
That's exactly right.
They don't actually stop that.
That's exactly right. Good point, Mike.
Okay, so if we could bring this back to just, I guess, the Black community writ large, I see kind of the similarities to Africa as well, where I see like the failures of institutions. Like, for example, what examples would you guys give of the institutions in the Black community, whether it be formal or informal?
One example I can give you are HBCUs. A lot of HBCUs in Black America, HBCUs and PBIs ran through a stint where they weren't getting a lot of funding in terms of from Black people, giving back to the very institutions they graduated from. So they had to take outside funding to stay afloat. So they had to acquiesce to the strings that came with that funding, and at those strings may say, well, you can't do this or you can't do that, or we prefer you to do this or you prefer to do that. And a lot of those strings were in direct conflict of what they stood for, the name of their institution, HBCU.
Okay, well, what would be another example? Or go ahead, Ulysses, if you have an example.
No. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have HBCUs, and then what other examples of formal or informal institutions would we give? You guys have any idea?
No, were you talking?
What was the question? You broke up for a second. I missed that. Go ahead.
Oh, you're talking.
Okay, I was going to say, so a lot of the similarities I see between, the failures in a lot of the African countries and then in the Black community specifically is a failure of, formal and informal institutions, not what they're supposed to do. So one example that Lionel gave was HBCU. You guys have some other examples?
I would say the matriarch. It's a failed institution that actually doesn't work to the benefit of Black people as a whole in this country. I mean, you have some other Negroes, some other brothers on different hangouts promoting the idea of marrying women who have various children as an advantage, to you as a Black male, and that's a failed institution. It doesn't really work. I mean, it's not democratic at all. It's either you get down or you lay down. There is no.
Very communist. Very communist.
It's a liability.
Okay, so we have the matriarchy. I would add also the church as well. There's huge failures of the churches, whether it's like I think the Baptist Church got like over the last 20 years like $300 billion, right? And that's just the Baptist Church. There's Black Catholic Church. There's the AME churches. There's there's so many different churches.
Methodist.
Well, I was going to say that's a whole another hangout right there because one has to figure where does the money go when we collect it every Sunday.
Well, Dollar Will says in the chat that I guess he's replying to Intergravity that the churches are just Let me read his comment. These systems are, including religion, are subordinate to culture.
Right. Well, they're not. I disagree just on that point. These institutions hold together cultures and they build cultures, right? So, so if we take a lot of these things, so let's say HBCUs, churches, any kind of other, other leadership positions. I can't really think of a lot of the institutions, whether they're formal or informal. But once you put all those together, and if they're working and functioning correctly, they support the culture, right? They hold it up. And once they start, that's when the cultures, start disintegrating, right?
So are you saying that the matriarch is being upheld by the culture, or the culture upholds the matriarch?
Yeah, it sounds like a chicken and the egg situation.
The culture. I mean, the matriarch is upholding the culture right now because it's one of the last, I guess, branches that are most functioning as they should.
Was it ever functioning? Was it ever a functioning institution, or was it a failed institution from the get-go?
I think the matriarchy, as it exists here in this country, was engineered here. It was more engineered.
I can agree with that.
And we saw when the real confluence of how it was really concentrated and was engineered specifically for the Black community, which really came through the whole war on poverty bill and all that kind of stuff, where your welfare system kind of grew out of that. Let the matriarchy kind of run amok, and kind of reduced the Black man out of the home and all these kind of things, and then you saw what what has happened. So I would have to say that a great deal of the matriarchy as we see it, the Black community today, was engineered.
It's an engineered failure, you're saying?
Yeah, very much so. Yes.
It's a defective product, right? I mean, if you have a defective product,
well,
Apple,
it's not only,
you at least. Let me just finish.
It's not only a defective product. I would, Mike. I wouldn't even say it was defective. I would say it's a weaponized product, designed for a certain level of destruction.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just gonna ask, if you have a defective Apple product, you can at least bring it back to the Genius Bar. I mean, who do you bring this product back to?
I don't believe this
Or the
product.
byproduct of it. Your unproductive black males who want to challenge you on every issue and want to
Who
put
are you
in
trying? Yeah, where?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey,
I don't know how you doing, Dollar.
Good evening. I like to clarify my comment about we have a culture. We might not like it. It might be dysfunctional, but we have one, and I stand by my statement that religion and just the way we do things is subordinate to that culture. Whatever be that as it may. I mean, for example, you can go in a black church and you can go into a white church, a black Baptist church, and a white Baptist church. You're gonna know. Nobody will have to tell. If you blindfolded yourself, you'll know when you're in a black Baptist church versus a white one. So
the collection plate will fall in your lap a couple of times before it's filled up.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that's a part. That's what I mean.
Let me ask
you guys when you guys was talking about how these systems will look in Africa. Well, they're going to look African. And the way that we are in America. I mean, you just kind of fast forward the way you are now in the conversation. Is the culture working or is it broken? It depends on the perspective of the person asking it in terms of, is the person an integrationist or not? And I guess from that standpoint, I believe such a person, an integrationist, would say yes, the culture is working.
So, and then to speak to Dollar Will's point, that's why I was just saying, it really kind of depends on what side of the fence you fall.
So Dollar Will, let me ask you this. So you were saying, religion, systems, all of that is subordinate to culture.
Yes, I'm saying culture is above everything.
Right. So I would just push back on this point, is that it's not an either or. These, systems or institutions, if you want to call it that way, they change the culture and the culture changes them. But either way, the institutions are what hold up the culture, right? It's not the other way around. Because
so slow that down. Say that. Run that by me again.
Okay, so it's not either culture or system.
What institutions hold up black culture?
Right. So that's exactly where what we were trying to delineate. Lionel was
churches and rap labels.
And then I said churches, and Mike said the matriarchy. So
rap music labels.
So all of these things. And of course, there's other things. They don't necessarily have to be formal institutions, but institutions nonetheless are what hold societies together. That's how they function through, right?
I guess I look at it.
People come together. They naturally have to come up with a way to govern themselves, to figure out what different groups of people are going to do. So these institutions are not like outside things. They're things that naturally rise from groups of people coming together, right? And they influence culture, right? So in a culture, or should I say, in a society where the institutions penalize things like corruption and theft and all these crimes, it reduces that in the culture. People value being honest, being good, etc.
I think what you just described is the dysfunction, because the institutions are an extension of the culture. The purpose of the institutions is to further the objectives of the culture. Period. If the institutions don't work to further the culture, you kill the institution. The culture. Culture is king. Now in America, in this country, the dysfunction is when the institution change is the culture. It's not supposed to work that way. It's supposed to be culture of change, control the institution. But let's just stay with the example of church, because this is not our religion, and because there's whatever, even within various strains of Christianity, in a sense, say take that as the dominant one. We don't control Christianity in America, and so therefore we don't really fully control even that institution. So that's part of the.
No.
Again, I'm not an assimilationist, so I want to, of course, be sensitive to that. That's the dysfunction we're talking about. But in the ideal abstract, the institution is an extension of the culture. It exists to further the ideals of the culture.
Now, Dollarwell, I have a question for you, because I kind of halfway joked and I said rap labels, right? However, I'm a child of the hip hop culture, right? Like, I was born in the late '70s and came up in the '80s and the '90s, and to me, because I grew up in it, and it was a culture that was created as I grew up in it, and I was active in it. My hands. So there's a position that I take in terms of creating culture. Like, you have to actually create the culture that you want to see reflected, right? You have to actually make that shit. You got to actually do it. So my question to you is, when you speak of institutions, do you relegate institutions strictly to just like cultural organizations like that, or do you also include like literally for-profit companies and stuff like that, because those are institutions as well?
You were boring, so I didn't get all of that, but I would say to the extent that the people in the
you want me to repeat it? You want me to repeat it?
Just that the last part.
Just the last part. No, I was saying, do you relegate institutions, in your view, from where you were speaking, right? Do you relegate that just to like, say, like cultural organizations and like churches and stuff like that, or is that definition, based on how you're applying it, is it broad to include like for-profit companies, right? So,
yes, because I got it. I can answer it. Yes, okay, I would say yes, it's broad, and you can see how we responded as race when there's like resentment that when BET got sold to white folks, there was resentment initially when Johnson Publications was owned by a white company. There was people feeling that Shea Butter has some kind of cultural, moral obligation. You know. So we don't have a distant kind of relationship with our businesses and our churches. It's like it's ours. It's like really intimate with us. And
that's why I wanted to ask you if this was relegated just to maybe more like institutions that did more cultural, or if it's also on the corporate side as well.
Those would be considered formal institutions, and then what we're just speaking on is informal institutions.
Okay, now listen to this. It's all hands on deck. To piggyback on what Dollar Will said, I agree with Dollar Will. To give an example, the Jewish people in America, they have the Anti-Defamation League. If you say anything negative about Jewish people, they will get on you. That is an institution to uphold its culture.
We have the NAACP.
No, they don't fight for black people. They fight for people of color.
Right.
We never had the
right.
I'm being facetious, you guys.
Okay.
To give you another example, you have Chinese. With the Chinese, their businesses operate on a Chinese culture. That's what they do. They do not deviate from that. And also,
was even Noah was speaking to.
You're breaking up.
You're
breaking up.
Oh wait, I was gonna say even Noah. Well, there was some time ago where Noah spoke to the changes in Chinese culture as a result of the new wealth, right? This new wealth class, this new
the new
right.
Well, that's actually kind of why I was pushing back against Dollar Will when he said it's only culture. I think culture influences institutions, but at the same time, institutions also influence culture, right?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Now, Ulysses, to what you said that we have. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Now, Ulysses, you said we have to make the culture that we want. I will submit that that line of thinking is relatively new because, and I have another point after this, because before this one world global economy, you still hit countries that were sectioned off. So the culture, if you came to a country by boat or whatever, by road, you had to acquiesce to that country. You couldn't take it over short of a war. So this new line of thinking is okay. We have to make the culture is relatively new. And the second point I want to make is the culture is as fragile as language. Like depending on where, if in a country, depending on where you're at, you can speak another dialect of the same language. The culture can be influenced even by the landscape. That's documented evidence. It's as fragile as that.
You make an excellent point, Lionel.
Explain that point.
Yeah.
You
Because
think,
wait. Go ahead, Lionel.
Explain it. About the land.
It's about the land, and people that teach people how to speak a certain way in movies. You have in England, English people that live on the rolling hills of part of England may have their accent may sound a rolling type of way, but if you live on the flatlands, it's very brute and straight to the point. It doesn't have a musicalness to it. I'll give an example.
Same thing with New York.
Right.
New York accent is different than an accent in Atlanta.
I'll give an example of that. Spanish. If you Cuban Spanish is somewhat different than Puerto Rican Spanish. Puerto Rican Spanish is somewhat different than Mexican Spanish. It's all where they're at. It's influenced by where they're from.
Yeah, put me in the queue.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes. I'll go after anti-gravity.
Put me in the queue.
Well, I was going to...
You want to ask me a question, Anton?
Yeah. Or I guess this is just generally to the panel. So do you think the reason Black people don't control their culture is because they don't control their language? And if Black people had let's just say there's a Black American, language that existed, they would have more control over, how their culture functions.
No, I'm not saying that. I was just pointing out how fragile the culture is in this modern day and age. There's something called the African American dialect, vernacular dialect. We do have a certain specific way of speaking,
right,
which come from Africa. But I was just pointing out how fragile culture can be influenced, and I was talking.
Right.
I was pointing out to.
No, it's just the question I was asking is: do you think if you guys had an actual language, that the culture wouldn't be as fragile, or you'd have more control over it? This is just a general question.
A non-English language or a version of English language?
Not an English dialect, like an African language.
It would definitely help.
Now let me respond. Let me respond to what I was saying, because I would posit to say, well, let's take hip hop for example, right? Because hip hop is a culture that was recently created. So we actually have proof of culture creation in the modern time that we were actively involved in, right? I would argue, I would dare anyone to basically say that hip hop wasn't created by Black folks, right? This is an entire culture. And with that, there's a dialect, there is a language contained within that.
That can be debated.
Well, it can be debated, but what I would say is this, Dollar. What I would have you do is I would have you on with people like KRS-One and all them to debate.
And they would agree with me.
No, actually, if you follow like KRS-One's Temple of Hip Hop doctrine, if you read any of like Crazy Legs' doctrine on b-boying, if you read any of Bambata's doctrine on all the tenets of the Zulu Nation, they basically all relate the same thing. They all relate the same thing, dude. These are the schools. The reason why I correlate culture creation to hip hop culture, because it's a culture that was created.
I'll just wait.
Well, look. What I'm saying is that it is an example of culture creation. It's not as if we don't have an example to look to. It may not necessarily be the type of culture you're looking to create right about now. However, what you do have is a recent example. This is what I'm pointing to. You can make heads or tails of, whether there's an actual dialect that fits with it. I say there is, because I know West Coast slang is different from East Coast slang, is different from Midwest slang, and no matter where you go in the world, you got who have a certain cultural identity. Even in their own language, they speak quote unquote hip hop. There's a slang, there's a hip hop slang, even in the language and whatever other language, right? As if there isn't examples of this stuff. It's not, you don't just say, okay, well, let's just duplicate hip hop. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that there is very real creation. I mean, hell, if you even want to get rudimentary with it, you can talk about like trap culture. Like,
what's the point?
Some of these more further. No. What the whole point is, and I'm saying, Dollar, I mean, I think I made it like about 2 or 3 times in the last few minutes. There's not an example of us creating culture in recent time, in recent memory. It can be done again.
Okay.
That's all. That's my whole point.
Okay. Who's next?
Go ahead, Dollar.
Oh, good. Okay. This is kind of going to apply to everything. What Ulysses just said, what Noah's point about when you are a minority group. Well, no, okay. First of all, we're kind of biased because we're Americans and we live in a pluralistic society. Okay, so back to your London example, British example, not now. They're all British, Highland, Lowland, whatever. They're all one. To say that one culture, you can have a culture without everybody in the culture. You can have diversity within a culture.
I agree.
Okay, so when one part,
that's why I brought up hip hop.
Let me finish. When one part of that diaspora affects another, I mean, they're already in the family. That's all good. That's all good. But in America, the outside influences, we can't block them out, and the outside influences are greater and mightier than us. Okay, so we struggle to try to maintain control.
When you say greater outside influences are mightier than us, like specifically.
Let me get it all out.
Okay.
When we say things with running mean we have about cultural appropriation, that is exactly what we're saying. That we're protesting our inability to control our own creations. Okay. People complain about
is it an inability? Is it an inability to control it, or is it a willingness to sell it?
Power play. No, it's both. It's a power play.
I found it's more to be on the other side of us willingness to sell it. No, it matters. No. Okay. Well, you finish and then I'll follow up.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
This sounds like a real BGS hangout.
Yeah. You go ahead, man. I done lost my point. Now you know completely.
Well, no. To say that
it was a lot of things I was weaving from Noah to now, and I'm gone. I lost it.
Hold, man. Hold. Let me say this right now. You don't listen.
Wait, what?
If you don't listen to me, we can take this out in the street.
Hey, Dollar Will.
Yeah.
Your points I agree with the UK example. I was expressing how fragile culture can be influenced, and to what you said, yes, we are influenced in America as a Black Americans. We are influenced, by the larger people. And I was saying how fragile culture can be influenced.
Does
Oh,
that come?
I know what I wanted to say. When we throw in modern technology like media, we have global media now. Man, for the first time in the history of man, we truly have created mass communication. Okay, and mass communication is not one or a few communicators to the many. Mass communication is the many communicating to the many, and not until the internet did we really achieve mass communication. Prior to the internet, a few power brokers on earth controlled the minds of earth, everyone on earth, because you had to have the boundaries to entry into mass communication were too great. Now we have essentially anybody can get on the
Yeah,
internet
YouTube.
and speak to the world via YouTube and other social media. So because of that, now all culture is like you say fragile now
And that's
because
what I was.
I agree. I remember what's way back when in the 90s when I used to do some training with some Native American journalists, and they were, I was learning about how the older leaders, elders, was in having conflict with the younger members because they didn't allow internet in their homes at that time. So they regulated it. You had to go to a public facility to be able to do it, and it wasn't only because of lack of money. The elders was concerned about the rate of these new ideas from the broader world, how much those ideas would impact their culture.
And that's what I was getting at when I said that up a group of people purposely saying, okay, we're going to create a new culture, is that type of concept is relatively new.
What concept is new?
Okay, when we say Black Americans, as we think on the scale of saying, okay, we know our culture is messed up. From this point on, we're going to forge a new culture. That
We've
type
been
of
trying that.
yeah,
No,
that
we've been having that discussion for 50 years or more.
but it's still relatively new in the grand scheme of things because up until recently, we nobody really had to say that to actually do that to actually put those plans into place.
Well,
I
no,
think
I
the
think I.
minority.
Wait, can we
I
have
think we were
What's that?
conscious of it. We've been out of slavery for 150 years. I think we were immediately conscious of it, and
Yeah,
What's that, Mike?
a few of us were working on it.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, can
No,
we have anybody out on this?
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say to Noah's point about institutions. I think black men are an institution within themselves, and the interracial marriage part is forbidden because of the institution that black men have within themselves. There's just so much.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello.
Yeah, there's an
I
echo.
think that might be Dollar Will.
Yeah, what I was saying, even though we've been out on the slave for 150 years, when I say a grand scheme of things, I'm talking about humanity. That still is still a relatively new concept. I say relatively, not relatively to how long America been a country, how long we've been on this earth.
Because you can't
That's
assimilate.
right. That's what I'm saying.
Hmm. Right. That's what I was saying about black men being an institution within themselves.
Speak on it, Mike.
Yeah, can you speak on that?
Well,
Man.
the idea of black men being, the leaders of the family, to be the provider. There's so much emphasis put on black men to be this savior of the black society that he's an institution by himself, and what you see is a lot of pushback from certain people of the community when they see black men who marry out because they see him as being devoid of the culture itself. Now he's no longer viable, so they want to destroy him, individually speaking.
But wouldn't you say that men have always been an institution? Men and then elders.
It's only been recently that black men have been their own institution, right? Because black men have been marginalized, from the greater society, and black women have taken on that role gladly, on their behalf, to exercise their own ideas. So black women are an institution too, but they're an institution that we really, for some people, they don't really want or need.
Well, what you are explaining is that's my point of view of why if we have black Americans have to make a choice. We either this I will have to I have to credit BGS for this. I kind of always felt it, but he brought it home, and he's right. I'm combining what he said and kind of my view that I'm just going to right down the line. Do we want to be American, assimilated, basically a white man in blackface, or not?
Well,
because there is no way to have a culture in America that you control and be a minority. I remember having the same issue back in the day when Louis Farrakhan resurrected the Nation of Islam, and they were talking about their separatist ideals, and I didn't think it would work then. Not that, and it wasn't from the standpoint of would they have the resources, would black people buy in. I was just still still back at that same mindset of white folks burned down Black Wall Street. They're not going to let you do this. Not in America. America is committed to oppressing the black man. They are not going to let you have peace. Not if you move out in the middle of the woods. It's just that the hatred for the black man is part of the fabric of America.
Well, I mean, again, I'm gonna operate under the assumption that I'm just not liked, right? That's because that's pretty much been the narrative. That's been the narrative. I mean, I'm 40 years old, and that's pretty much been the narrative, right? So at this stage, I'm not assuming I'm not liked. I'm not assuming none of that, right? With that being said, though, I understand that there's a whole lot of other men out here that other groups of men don't like. This is just kind of like human nature.
No, it's not.
I'm trying hate. I'm saying hate, aggression, warring, all that type of shit is human nature, right? You can't point to it. Well, it's human. It's humans who exercise it, right? So I'll leave it up to humans to make the decision on whether barbaric acts are befitting of human behavior or not. I know I won't. I'm just being objective, right? To those who actually do engage in it.
Can I say one thing? In regards to what Dr. Will said, I think that you can be a minority and still keep your culture. That happens.
I do believe that
all over the world.
Exactly.
We're not talking all over the world. I said in America you can't.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
All over the world, that would include America.
No, it doesn't. We're talking about a hostile host. Okay, right. It's one thing if the host would leave you alone, then yes, I would agree. It's possible. Okay, yes, there are groups. The Asian communities in America are pretty much left alone.
Yeah,
okay, they are allowed to segregate. They're not gonna. I'm
not sure if it's an allowance more so than it is an enforcement. I would like to see white folks force Chinese to be stereotypical Chinese. I would like to see that.
Well, if you really think about it, the Chinese put their language in the face of white people, so it is a sense of allowance. But I think what Dollar Will was saying is that this is not human-like behavior. It's sociopathic in that sense that they're going specifically after black men and not after Chinese men. And
can I ask a question on that? So then, do you think that then this is the time where, the black community not even real language, but that they create their own language.
Delaware,
Kind of what insulates, a lot of the other communities is because they have their own language for which, they can, operate within. Other people can learn the language, but most people don't spend the time to.
Because they take the language out of us.
Yeah, Delaware.
Well, no,
I
was going to say
the basis of what Mike said. You said that they go after the black man, which I do agree. You don't hear specifically saying, "Well, we're going to go after the black woman to cripple what in a worse to cripple the black community." They specifically go after the black man because you understand the black man leads the community. Now, what Mike was saying, black men are an institution. So if you go after the black man, you're in essence breaking down the institution which holds the whole group, culture, or race of people together.
Okay, wait.
You can also look at it this way. Traditionally, correct me if I'm wrong, through war, what you do is you go in, you kill the man, you kill the young boy, so because he's gonna grow up and want to avenge the death of his father. You fuck the women and make new people from the women. The women depend on the conquering man, and she just assimilates right in. Women are highly adaptable.
So that makes the situation worse because our plight in America. Because if you're going after the man, the institution of the race of people, you're breaking that down. So you have these women and inculcating them with this toxic mindset that just makes if she's dependent on the conqueror, it just makes the whole situation worse. And which we see today with all this black feminism rhetoric and what's going on YouTube. You see it playing out right now.
Yes, we're gonna have to make a decision. Either we want to consciously assimilate, or we're gonna be consciously in defiance. One or the other. We cannot proceed as though the question does not exist. And hold on, and we got this at the same time where a disturbing number of black people in America are saying things like pro-black as a slur. That lets you know how far lost we are.
Okay, my question. Here's my question, right?
After Ulysses, Nagon goes next.
Okay, my question is okay. What is the juxtaposition? Okay, and I need you to frame this in a modern context so that I can frame my head around it. Because I view the world as one holistic system of systems, right? So there's one global system, ecosystem, right? And then there's all these other systems that. What I'm trying to figure out here is what is the juxtaposition? What is we can look to that's pre-existing, that's juxtaposed to the concept. I hear assimilation. That means that if you basically function the civilization, if you function within it, you've assimilated. This is how I understand assimilation.
No, function. Right? No, so assimilation means that you bow to the will of the conqueror.
Well, let me read the definition.
No, I'm telling you what I use the word.
I'm going by the literal definition of the word assimilation because you're using it.
Forget the literal definition. Just take
no.
Hold on, damn the word. Let me tell you the meaning of what I mean, and we could pick another word. Let's not get hung up on what the definition is. If I use the word inappropriately, then screw it. But you can understand what I mean. When we want to maintain our sense of self and identity, okay, or do we want to become white people in blackface agents for furthering the empire of another tribe? Let me get it all out, up to and including warring on his behalf, fighting military, killing on his command. That's it.
Nagon, you want
to? I mean, go ahead. I mean, I'm just, if we're if we're going to use words like assimilation, then I think what we should do is we should use it based on what the word actually means. No, so the concept that you're referring to is assimilation, is it not? That's what you're referring to. Well, no. So then what I'm saying is then we need to apply what the word actually means then. Because if it's not, because if you're implying something that actually isn't assimilation, then that's not what it is.
Then
what I'm saying is
scratch the word. I mean what I said. Even if there's no word in existence for it, I mean what I said.
Look, so okay. What is the system that you're proposing that is juxtaposed to a system of assimilation? Just so that I know, so that I can consider like shifting all my businesses over into maybe like a situation that you're talking about. I hear this all the time, but then I'm like, okay, well, so what's the juxtaposed, or what's the system that's actually countered that I can actually integrate my businesses into to actually serve as that anti-assimilation component? So this is why I'm asking. I'm like, okay, well, if you're talking about literally integrating into the global system as a whole, that's assimilation, then what is the anti to that?
What do you mean by there's no way when you say integrate into the global system as a whole? If I'm tribal and just dealing with my own people, I'm a part of the whole. So I don't understand what you mean when you say integrate.
So then what I'm trying to understand is the nature of assimilation that you're talking about then.
I scratched the word. I'm not trying to get hung up on that. I explain. Okay, you asked me what's the antithesis to staying here and becoming white people in blackface. Pan-Africanism.
So I mean, so so does Pan-Africanism, does it frown upon capitalist business principles? Does it frown upon for-profit companies?
No.
Does it frown upon traditional banking? Does it frown upon cryptocurrency? No. I'm trying to understand what this assimilation is versus the other side of the game, and how I make a determination as to whether I'm assimilating into something or not.
Well, it's everything that you hold dear right now, that you hold dear right now, plus the consciousness to say, I want to do business with my tribe around the earth to raise them up at the same time. If they have a quality product, if they don't, hey, you know.
No, and you know what, the reason why I'm pressing you on this, because I actually agree. I agree with what you're saying, and you know that even if that is my aim, even if that is my objective, I'm still considered an adherent of white supremacy philosophy and assimilation, and I don't understand it. That's why I'm really just trying to get to the crux of it.
Yeah, who was it that said don't look back? Okay, it's crazy idea. You can't stop it.
I think you know who's been.
I'm not. Let me just say this. I'm not even talking about in this modern time and on these YouTube streets. Okay, this divide you're talking about is older than the internet and YouTube.
I agree.
Back decades. So I'm not even talking about. It's just a schism within our culture that we have to decide. What we want to be, and this when you said how does it look, how are we going to move in the world? Are we going to be doing business on a large scale? Well, if you're doing business on a large scale, there is a international culture for business. That language is English, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That currency is the US dollar. So inevitably you're going to have to be competent at functioning in the world outside of your tribe. But
if you're able to do that, have you assimilated?
Let me get it all at the same time as always being mindful of your tribe.
But if you have the capability to do so, have you assimilated? That's my question. And I'm not putting you on the chair,
No,
quote unquote. We're putting this on the record, right?
No,
right. We're having
no,
the discussion, right? Okay.
no, absolutely not.
Right. Okay.
There's nothing that you're not compromising yourself by getting an education or by making money, or by doing you're not even compromising yourself by doing business with people that aren't black.
But wouldn't you say?
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
But wouldn't you say that getting a higher education as a black man makes you an educated lame? So therefore, that is a compromise.
Wait a minute, it could make you an educated if you miss it. A lot of stuff that poses for education is indoctrination, is brainwashing. So so it could, if you get an education and you come out of that school and you detach yourself completely from your tribe and you don't see feel no sense of obligation to do anything positive. I'm not talking about wreck your life and put your comfort at risk. It's just too easy to help people. It's just so many ways you can help people. And if you don't have that mindset, then I would say, yeah, that person is lame to his tribe. He's an educated lame.
To piggyback on what you just said, Dollar Well, and I want to say hello to Prim. He just joined the panel.
Yo.
I was listening to a John Henry Clark video years ago, and he made a statement when one of these Arab kings, he was sending his countrymen or his group of race of people to England or Europe to learn, and upon leaving, he told them that I'm paraphrasing what John Henry Clark said, what he told this Arab person told his people. You're not going over there to impregnate white women or to assimilate to a white culture. You're going over there to learn, get the knowledge and understanding, and bring it back here to build up our culture.
I've heard that video, and the modern criticism of continental Africans when they come to the United States, not enough of them take their butt back. So Africa has been hurt by that too. They get over here, they don't go back home.
Or when they go to Europe,
yeah.
they automatically marry a European woman or a European man.
I was hoping Nagon could jump in and maybe talk about Brazilian culture and how different it is in comparison to African American culture, where Black Brazilians, Afro Brazilians.
Yeah, the Afro Brazilian culture is similar to ours. They are it's a culture that down there. It's similar to ours, but the family structure is a bit more intact. But they suffer a great degree of racism down there. Even though Brazilians try to say, it's an equal culture and all that, that's not true. The African culture there is one, even though it's respected for some of the things that the Africans have done. It's still a culture that's put upon, if you will. And they, like in Rio, where you go into some of the favelas and so forth, you have specialized police forces that are just there to, to literally police the favelas, but they don't touch the richer white community. So you have big disparities there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As far as the culture with man, kind of intact. You do tend to have a lot of fathers and mothers together, but I'll be very frank. You see a lot of families. There is a lot of family breakup in many ways, and you do see a great degree of single motherhood, and you do see some of the things that we see here, like crime amongst the blacks on black is high there. There's a lot of insane murdering going on. So there's some things that are very similar to what's going on here. But yet, you do still have, somewhat of an intact family, moms and dads. Even though I have to be very frank with you, I did see some of that, starting to, I saw more and more of what we see here, that matriarchy and that single motherhood. Definitely have seen more of that. When I first started going down, I started seeing a lot more of it. But, later years, starting around like 2009, 2010, you could really see it. But still, like I said, they have a lot of problems, socially, culturally, as far as, the dance and the music and the samba music and all like that. They rule. They rule. They rule that shit. And then that's what kind of keeps them keeps that part of the culture really alive, and where people really want to engage. That's a big part of being Brazilian, and which is definitely given to the African culture there. But there's a lot of racism and separation and poverty. That's really more of a racialized basis. But anyway,
you still have institutions, right? I mean, what institutions are those Afro Brazilians leaning on? It's got to be the family first institution, right?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, they definitely have the family, but as far as what are they really on? You have so much of the wealth is concentrated in the in the white upper middle to very wealthy classes. They blacks have a hard time. They really have a very hard time really gaining any wealth.
What's the black population percentage in Brazil?
Well, it all depends, because you got pure.
I know
black
is hard to define. I know that's hard to define,
but the population is 80 million down there. It's not more. Double that of Black Americans.
Yeah, but yeah, you definitely. Well, you have more blacks in Brazil than you have almost anywhere except Nigeria. So
Nigeria comes second.
The largest number of Africans outside the continent of Africa is in Brazil.
Yeah. Exactly. That's in Brazil. Yeah. I said, so.
But in one country, it is Brazil. Nigeria comes second.
Yeah. I mean, Nigeria first. Nigeria almost has
Nigeria first.
1 billion people. Yeah.
No,
a billion?
Nigeria's first. Yeah. There's no question about that.
I don't think it's a billion. I think the country.
It's quarter of a billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to understand is do they have, like, we are 13% of the population here? Do they is it skewed like that for them, or is it more people that you would consider black, like by Black American standards? I don't know. I don't even know if they have data that they collect that I guess Afro-Brazilian. I mean, I don't even think that
they have that. What's the question?
Do they collect data like that where you can say the Afro-Brazilian population is X% of Brazil? What is it?
Yeah. You're basically looking there, the population there in Brazil. I would say, I think maybe around 30% or so. That's about what you're looking at as far as the population, but it's misleading because you have so many white people that have, Afro-Brazilian blood in them as well. So, and then you have more and more Brazilians today claiming that they're black now, because the government is doing certain things to kind of right some of the wrongs of the past. So you have a lot more black people who before were trying to claim white, but are now claiming black in Brazil now. So it's kind of changing, which is very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, they are having their black consciousness movement, and it's important to know that Brazil is they had a I don't know how to say it, like they tried to de-black. They tried to breed blacks out. There was a government policy. They were not you can Google.
I know the history very well on there.
Improving the race, where black They called it improving the race, and
well, they tried it, didn't work because you had to look at just the whole, how the country was founded, and Portugal was a country of about 1 million people, and and they were trying to take over the world, if you will, for the very small population. So they brought so many Africans there, that they can't cull them. It's just
so
too many.
Race mixing was encouraged by the government, if I understand correctly.
Well, not so much encouraged. It's you didn't have a choice. You had to do it. It's like it wasn't encouraged. You had to. You had so many Africans there, and you had only a few, few whites, if you will.
Well, they definitely wanted to lighten it. They wanted to get rid of the African.
Hey, Will, you want me to finish, man? I mean, I'm gonna tell you. You over there cut. I mean,
say what you want to say. After you go.
No. Say what you want to say, Will, and then when you're done,
go ahead. I'm gonna chill.
No. You were gonna say something.
I was gonna say, that was the government policy. They were trying to make a ambiguous population and definitely make it not black. They were definitely trying to get rid of the black. Even
impossible.
I'm not saying whether it was possible or not. I'm saying that no, the government didn't accomplish its goal. But I guess I'm trying to draw a contrast between the United States, where we had miscegenation laws. I don't believe Brazil ever had anything like that.
Well,
it was encouraged to the extent if it wasn't prevented, and they were definitely trying to not have this black population. Even up to including encouraging race mixing, whereas the United States, which racist in its core, wanted separation of the races.
All right. Anyway, as far as the numbers, as far as blacks there, was so great you couldn't really separate. You did have a very hardcore, population of just black Brazilians, and then you had many Brazilians who were just mixed. Mixed with other, with black and Indian and even Japanese, because many Japanese came down there as well. But and then you had a very hardcore white class, and that's a smaller pure class, but yet it's the class that has all of the money, So the wealth is still concentrated very much in the upper ruling white class of that culture, and the black Brazilians, the Afro Brasileiros, are at the bottom. Okay, that's just where that is. But where they have a lot of, where they still have a system in place, where we have it here, but it's really more defined down there. Is you have the dark, and then you have kind of like the light skin, kind of mixed black who actually thinks, or almost will try to call themselves almost like they're white, of which they are not, but they do get more favor than the black ones do in Brazil. So the extremely dark blacks are still pretty much at the very bottom of the totem pole there, and then you have gradations of mixtures of blacks, where you have morenas, that are light skin. You can see that they're mixed. But some of them will consider themselves to be white, and they're not. But yet, they wouldn't be considered a white person here. But in Brazil, they would, kind of consider themselves to be white, if you will. So which may seem kind of silly, but they do play the color game down there heavily. That's a big part of the racial caste systems that they have in Brazil, based on dark black, light skin, near white, and then white. They play that, and it kind of literally falls down economic lines as well, with opportunities with schooling and so forth. So you see a lot of that. That's starting to to go away a bit more now. It's starting to dissolve slowly. But that system is still in place in many respects. But it is going away. You have African Consciousness Day, and you have all these kind of things that go on in Brazil now that actually kind of celebrate African culture, but still, they dealt with very harshly with the legal system, police. There's a lot of crime, high murder rates. So there's still a lot of dysfunction based on
And they're using the military against those people as well instead of just using the police. They cracking
well,
down.
no. They don't say so much. They have a militarized police. Like I said, in Rio they have a very elite form of police that they call BOPI. And BOPI would stand for Batalhão, okay, Operações, okay, Policiais Especial, BOPI. All right, and that force is basically a very militarized police force, specialized police force, that is designed to go into the favelas and to basically do state-sponsored terrorism, state-sponsored, state-funded terrorism against a certain groups of people, and that's the poor.
Can I just add one thing to what Nigon said? He's very right. When it comes to like race, if you compare it to the United States compared to Latin America as a whole, Latin America was conquered by Spain and Portugal, and Spain and Portugal themselves used to be conquered by the Moors for close to 1,000 years. So they didn't have as much of an issue, intermarrying, having children with the locals that the United States had. So there was a lot more, of them marrying, Native Americans, the African slaves, a lot of mixing in that way going on. Like right now, my mom's friend, she's Colombian. She looks, as pale as any of the white people here in the United States. But I met her grandmother, and she's basically Nigerian. So
yeah, you see that.
Yeah, they have a lot of that going on. So race over there is a lot more fluid than it is in the United States. There's not like
exactly. So
right,
what he's saying is right. We're here in the United States. You may have had you had the one drop of black blood in your blood made you black. So from any standpoint genetically, if you had a black grandmother or something else like that, you were pretty much considered black here in this country, even though you looked white. I mean, we had people who passed, people like Carol Channing and some others. We even had a black, a president who had some black blood in him, and that was not John Garfield, not Garfield. Why am I forgetting this president's name? Shit.
the U.S.
But anyway, no, he was not John, not Grover Cleveland.
Taft.
Lincoln?
Say that again.
Lincoln?
Or
No.
Taft.
No.
Okay, so
It begins with a G. I'm fucking up, but anyway, I'll remember it in a minute. But anyway, if you had a little, bit of black blood in you, you were considered to be black here in this country, Whereas in Brazil, it's not so much, how, what kind of black, everyone will have some black blood in them. So it's not genetically, how you look, but it's more phenotypically, kind of how how you look. So that's kind of how they kind of determine, your blackness or whiteness is how you look, facially and so forth, as opposed to what your actual genetic heritage is. Because you will look at blacks, white supposedly women down there, and they'll be blonde haired, kind of tan skin, real, real pretty, and they'll be considered white girls. But they'll have a, grandfather, grandmother, somebody looking just like me, and they'll still be considered themselves white. So that's a pretty big difference.
I'll say this:
what we have here
that can really confuse the race thing in terms of people wanting to get out from under being dominated and subjected, and basically go their own way. Not saying isolationists, but go their own way, because when you have these conversations, people start to say, well, I'm black because of this, well, I'm white because of this, well, I'm Mexican or Japanese because of this. That pertains to the black race, that can really confuse things. You know,
Well, that's why you have that big issue in Brazil now. We have a lot of people now call themselves blacks, who before were call themselves whites, and now they call themselves blacks now, and all this kind of stuff going on.
I just saw a video. Have you all ever saw the TV show Office? The Office.
Yeah.
Remember?
I haven't seen it.
Remember the Indian chick?
Oh yeah,
Mandy?
yeah.
Her brother went applied to a university, and he applied under black.
Man.
Oh, you talking about Mindy?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's from Cambridge. She's from here.
Yeah, her brother applied to a school, but he applied under black.
Yeah.
And he got admitted. I say that to say, I lost my train of thought, but when people say the government say, well, we're going to give black people reparations. You're going to have a lot of other non phenotypically black people say, well, I deserve that because my great grandmother or great grandfather was black.
If you ever got reparations here, you would see plenty of white folks turn around and say, I'm black too. I'm black too.
So that whole reparations things,
you would see that shit going down.
Even though I understand it, and I agree with it, but at the same time, it's a dead topic, because if it happens, you are going to get a whole lot of black backlash from a lot of black people, and these YouTube streets will blow up.
Because they're looking for helicopter money when it comes to reparations. And when we talk about reparations, at least between Ulysses and myself, we're talking about social equity programs that can actually move people forward. And the problem is that these so-called well, I don't want you to say the term pro-black, because I know that it offends Dollar Will, but these guys who claim to be pro-black are always looking for this cash bundle of money to be dropped out of a helicopter in a golden parachute, and it's not going to happen.
It's not.
The ones that I hear both. Yeah, I mean, I hear dumb ideas all around. People that don't call themselves pro-black and some that are. I mean, but yeah, giving people money is not going to, that's not. No, I would like to have some money, but that's not going to. The best way to help us is not to give us cash, because we'll turn right around and go to the mall and blow it.
Especially if your face isn't on the money.
Right, and
we'll give it right back. We'll give it right back to the conqueror.
And then Dave Chappelle make a skit about this reparations, where the I don't know, the price of Sprint and
Cadillac
KFCs went through. Bought out all the chicken. There was no chicken at the KFC. I think there was something.
If we all got a windfall of money, the Black America will be in more debt. Period. It'll be in more debt
if athletes can't control their money, we're not going to do any better as a race. Look at all the athletes and entertainers that go broke.
So when what's that chick name that with the hair and the face, the light skin one, the gay one?
Is she on YouTube or
Yvette Carnell? When she say, "I'm gonna be over here waiting for my reparations," and people are listening to this,
listening to it
a long time.
Contributing to it, that lets you know upon other live streams the state of black. I give an example today. I was reading articles, doing this. I was doing my thing. I say, you know what? I feel like I'm improving myself. I feel like I'm learning. Actually, I am. I'm it's like I'm in the books. So I said, let me go on World Star Hip Hop and look at the first 5 videos. God, I was so disappointed. I was extremely disappointed because they all, oh my God, That's the state of Black America.
Lionel, is this your longest hangout? This thing's still rolling.
Oh yeah, you know what?
Yeah. We're gonna wrap it up in 15 minutes, anyways.
Hold on a second. Okay, the black president I'm talking about right now, who people thought definitely had black blood, and it seemed like they couldn't really deny it, and then he ultimately had to become a Klansman, if you will, before he took the oath of office to make sure that he didn't support black people, was Warren G. Harding. And it seemed Warren G. Harding that seemed that was that his racial heritage and past was very much in question. So his grandmother was a black woman. So that's what we're talking about. You know, there were others who were considered to have black blood in them. You know, Andrew Jackson. They tried to say Lincoln did. Some tried to say Calvin Coolidge did, and Dwight D. Eisenhower, but there doesn't seem to be really much support for that. But Warren G. Harding certainly was one who definitely had a mixed heritage.
You know, all of that. I don't mean to be crass or rude. I don't give a damn about that shit.
Neither do I. I mean, especially after if you say that you have black blood, and then next thing you know, you're being inducted into the Klan just to make sure you don't support black people.
When I say I don't give a damn, what my thing is when it comes from black people, they say, well, they got black in them, so they black. It's like it's like, okay, you grasping for an olive tree. Who gives a fucking fuck, man? Just don't grasp. Well, this person is 1/8 2 to the 20th black, so they black. You monkey! Oh my God, it's
but
too much
that was a racial
symbolic.
That was a racial caste system. That's part of the racial caste system. It's a system that's used to keep a certain group, down. So that's specifically what it's used for. And
it's mainly these women out here saying, well, they're they super great granddaddy was black, so they black. Really?
Well, look at the women's dating profiles on certain dating apps, right? You'll see many black women talking about on 1/8 French, 1/8 German, 1/8 this, all mixed up in the head, but still want reparations.
Yeah, it's totally screwed.
It's a lot of self-hate.
Yeah, that pisses me off when people talk about race and then folks start throwing in nationalities, and then it's like it's funny when you watch those reveals for the DNA companies. People are actually going on there. They're looking for a finding that shows a nationality. It's funny.
It's ridiculous.
Well, I did my DNA. And when black people say, well, I got Indian in my family, I ain't got none of that in me. It said less than 0% you got this in you. But it sure did say, buddy, you are from the part of Africa. They got the kinkiest, curliest, nappiest hair you could think of. So be proud of that. And that thing said West Central Africa. I said, well, I'll rock West Central then.
It said, nigga.
Said, why you take this test? You know what you are.
Mine gonna have a piece of fried chicken.
That's why they named Niger. That's why they named that country Niger. They can't wait. They can't wait to use that name. They want to add one. They want to add one extra G to it. They just can't wait.
You have a picture of a watermelon come back in the mail. Like, there you go. This way. What you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to touch on what Nagone said about state-sponsored terrorism. I mean, we see that on YouTube with people putting money in super chats, talking about drowning people in vats of acid, and
To the go, man. Your laugh is funny, man.
Bringing people to parking lots and Walmart. I'll beat you with a bagel. You want some cream cheese with that?
Oh Lord, have mercy, help me, brother.
Yeah, that's been going on for a while. That's not new.
Yeah, on that,
having that war for
on that stage
during slavery, we were having that war.
on that state sponsored police force, I remember back in the day, we had a group down here in Atlanta called the Red Dogs, and those brothers had carte blanche in the hood, man, and the dope boys and the gang members were terrified of those brothers because you couldn't stop them. I mean, the rules were off with those cats, and everybody knew it. You know, I mean, I wasn't in the hood, but I mean, it was like an urban legend. It was like a myth that just, you know, went around. And I mean, I've seen them in action. I've seen them in action like at like the clubs, and I see.
Were they black cops or white cops?
All black, all black, and they were not. Man, I've seen people try to buck up to them dudes, and I've seen them almost kill cats. They beat them so bad. And that's just seeing them, you know, on doing part-time job at the, you know, security at the club. But I heard about how them brothers got down, and they were so bad they had to disband them. You know, but they were effective. They were effective. Matter of fact, as an aside, I think I heard I read a headline today that dude in the Philippines, Durate, said something like he was going to have to kill some police officers or something like that. You know, so I mean, I hear he gets pretty bucked. Durate, yeah, I hear he gets pretty bucked down there.
My brother's wife, you know, she's Filipina, and you know they've gone back and forth there, and Duterte. I mean, this guy, I've watched some programs with this dude, and this dude is a stone cold fucking gangster. This guy's a gangster. And no. When I say I'm not playing, this dude is a fucking G. And he sits back and he don't even try to play it off. He's like, listen, man, listen. You come in my town. You come up. When I was mayor, you know, when I was mayor of Manila, when I was mayor, listen, this is what I did. You came into town. I killed you. We killed a lot of people. I enjoyed it. Yeah, he was talking like he was like, I liked it because what he was like, what it did, it stopped people from abusing drugs in the area. We kept them out of there. We killed them. So now we feel as though that we're gonna have to kill all of you guys now who are doing the drugs. And if you're running around the area, we're gonna kill you. We're not gonna take you to jail. We're killing you. We're killing you first, and then we're gonna try to take you to jail later. I mean, he was talking shit like that. I was like,
wow.
And not that he was talking it, but he was fucking doing it.
He openly wants to kill the Filipino Ray and Pookies.
Oh no. He didn't claim. He said, I'm going to kill you. I'll kill you. And I will be out there myself looking to kill you. And these guys knew it. They knew it. They were like, oh, this guy's not fucking around.
Yeah, who's dumb enough to mess with drugs in that country?
And I mean, and a lot of people.
Two options.
Amnesty International and all that is down there saying this guy is fucking out of his mind.
Two options.
Well, you know they do the same. They do the same thing. They do the same thing in Iran. The same thing that Duterte is doing in the Philippines. They do the same thing in Iran. If you get caught with drugs, selling drugs, or anything like that, they just execute you. They don't waste any time.
But they got a big problem in Iran. Iran's got a big heroin problem. They got a big heroin problem.
Right, because they're next to Afghanistan.
Yeah, they got a big heroin problem.
Well, actually, not just
a lot of people.
Most Muslim countries, the punishment for drug trafficking over a certain amount was death. You don't get taken to jail; you get executed.
Yeah.
I mean,
plus there's a lot of corruption. So money talks. Let's be honest. So money can buy your way out of certain kind of things, but they do have a harsh policy towards it. And this Duterte, he's a fucking savage. Straight up gangster savage. He don't give a fuck. He's telling you, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And when I remember when Obama and them were sitting there trying to say, well, what are you talking about? You're wrong about this. He was like, shut the fuck up. Do what the fuck I want over here. Don't tell me what to do in my country. Shut the fuck up. And he don't tell him anything. It was like, oh shit, nobody can tell him anything.
He said, I'm gonna keep doing this, but unless the CIA assassinates me, I know they're plotting to do it right now. But
I remember he said that.
That was
yeah.
That was savage, man.
But he said it. But he was also saying, in an undercover way, he was like, if I see any one of you CIA guys and you think you're gonna kill me, I'm gonna fucking kill you first. So you got to understand what you're dealing with when you kill me. All right. I mean, this guy's a G, bro. He's a G. In fact, he gets a G pass, bro. He gets a G pass. That's why the guys are like, they're like, this dude is such a fucking G. Just leave him alone. I mean that's where this guy's coming from. I mean,
he's the prototypical alpha male. No, unlike some of these guys on YouTube, you know, with their power.
No, because he doesn't talk. He's not saying, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna knock you out." He's like, "I'm killing you. Watch."
No, when he says he kills people, he actually did kill people when he was.
He killed. Of course,
that's not a joke.
He said it. He was on TV setting people like, "This guy's got to go. This guy's saying that he's a murderer." He's like, "I said this shit. What the fuck y'all gonna do about it? I'm president. Fuck y'all gonna do."
So how do you guys feel about the effectiveness of a policy like that? You know, to be a deterrent.
I think the only thing we have to do is just go back to the Box Rebellion, and then we started to look at when the Chinese decided to close their borders and clean out their drug problem. They just started smoking people in the streets, and they got rid of their drug problem. It disappeared.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. I like it.
That's what happened. That's what happened. That's what happened. So
well, Trump wanted to bring back, execution for drug crimes in the U.S.
Well, he's going to have to kill a whole lot of his fucking people, so that's why. That's the only reason why.
Well, he's backed off.
Why do y'all think? Why do y'all think the drug rate? And maybe my premise is wrong, but if is the drug rate among African Americans declining? I thought it was, and if it is, why do you think it's declining?
Well, first of all, this is the thing. Our drug problem was never as great as it was claimed. In fact, the least drug addicted group of youth in this country is African American youth, and it's been like that for decades. And you've never heard that in the news. Just like today, who do we see falling all over the place and dying all over the joint? Where they're going out so hard, it's actually dropping the survival rates of white Americans all over. Their lifespan rates are declining behind this terrible drug scourge. So they've always been on the drugs. It's just been you've been the one blamed for it, pretty much. Because
I was going to say, Nicole, the other part to that is that in all of the places where cannabis has been legalized, go look at the crime rate numbers.
Yeah.
Dropped.
So
double digit.
And the crime rate has been dropping for a while, but you have to understand there's a lot of money, a lot of dollars circulate around this. So they hype it up and they arrest people and do a lot of craziness. As we're starting to see now, I think somebody came with an article where you saw where they were planting, a police car planted.
Oh man, Inglewood.
Of Nikes just
3 more minutes.
Set a lot of people. I was in the gym the other day and I had a police officer. He was telling me, he goes, they're doing a lot. He said that the police themselves are involved in killing in that town, just like we had going on here in New York. To gentrify areas and move people around. The police were coming in with their own death squads. And we had that going on here. This is nothing strange to the United States. So the police are a big part of the crime game here in this country. So and they do a lot of killing, and they and then they put it on other people. It's just a part of what goes on here. It goes on all over.
In terms of that, it's actually been kind of shifting now from Black people. They're still doing this to Black people, but it's shifting more to the Hispanic communities now, where they're using ICE to round up people to put in private prisons. Where they get
it's money
per bed, and then they work until they get to their deportation hearings.
I definitely like that whole death squad thing, and the police going in there to go ahead and clean it up, and having the only problem I have with that is potential for corruption, because at a certain point
that's the whole thing about it.
It gets corrupted.
That's the whole thing about it. It's evil. So at the end of the day, that could be used against anyone. Then it becomes a political group.
Exactly.
And then you have an assassin group that can go out and just do whatever they want. And you can't have that in a civilized society. Now, the United States calls itself civilized. I don't believe that we are to a large extent, but you have to keep a close, tail on that. I looked at the whole Barpi thing in Brazil, where they go into favelas and killing poor people and black people, and the murder rates still stayed at a very high rate. And then those guys became more effective in being able to fight Barpi. So at the end of the day, just like a kid, you slap him around for a while, he's going to be able to hit you back, and that's kind of where you're at. So so I have a lot of questions about this stuff. I don't think long term it's very effective. I understand what the Chinese did because they had a very strong government around them that was looking to erase an immediate problem, and they were able to close around that in a Chinese type of way and deal with it. But they couldn't keep that kind of thing up without them actually risking the survival of their government. So that had to end as well. But I don't buy into those kind of practices, especially on any long-term basis. Just it's destructive.
Any other comments before I stop the broadcast?
Nope.
Oh man, this is going, man. We're gonna end tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this was this was a
You
good
guys are going in.
old school BGS type of hangout without.
Yeah. You guys went in, man.
Make sure you give a shout out to the new subscribers.
Yeah, new subscribers. My ice is colder. What's up, man? New subscriber.
Yeah, Pharaoh Edmondson was in the house.
Yeah, Pharaoh, what's going on? And
Jedi.
am I missing any? Yeah, Jedi Focus. What's going on? Nice to have you over
And
here.
we're not gonna leave Yada out.
Yada.
He's not
Oh,
you.
yeah, no. Just shouting her out too.
Yada.
Yada, man. Good conversation.
Yada hanging in there, man. Yada's a trooper. But my man, my ice, ¿cómo está, amigo? Habla conmigo, eh?
Hey.
Yeah.
Don't forget to come back Friday. Friday's our economic show. We're gonna have a good one Friday. Might set the video out with RT. But I want to focus on about an hour on that one. Good video. So we're gonna have a good show Friday. Same time, same channel, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And with that said, I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, y'all. All right, man. Great show, guys.